the shoes by the door. By the time Ethan turned off the rental car and killed the headlights, the house looked almost staged in its stillness. A single porch light burned over the door. Everything else was dark. The little rental at the edge of the subdivision sat exactly as he had left it 6 days earlier, wedged between another beige one-story and an empty lot full of pale dirt and scrub that would probably become more houses by fall. A bicycle Noah had half outgrown still leaned against the side fence. The trash bin stood crooked beside the garage. Nothing about it warned him. He checked the time on the dashboard, 1:53 a.m. He should have stayed near the airport and come back in the morning. That would have been smarter. But the site survey outside Flagstaff had wrapped a day early, and once he saw he could make the last flight home, he had booked it without thinking twice. He was 34, a project supervisor for a construction and infrastructure company, and the kind of man who still believed effort ought to turn into something solid if you kept at it long enough. Better pay, steadier ground, a life that stopped wobbling every time one expense hit wrong. His wife Maya was 31, and mostly home these days, piecing together small online sales and handling the routines that organized their son's world. Noah was 6, bright, funny, deeply particular about sound and timing and touch, and he needed more consistency than most children did. Ethan had come home expecting to surprise them. Instead, he stood on his own front walk, staring at a pair of men's shoes he knew did not belong there. They were set neatly to one side of the front door, like whoever owned them had been taught to respect other people's thresholds. Men's loafers. Soft brown leather. Expensive enough that Ethan noticed it before he understood why he was noticing. They looked wrong against the cheap choir welcome mat Maya kept meaning to replace. He stopped with one foot on the walkway. For a second, his mind did something useless and polite. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe one of Maya's cousins passing through town. Maybe someone's car had broken down late and... No, not at 2 in the morning. Not with the shoes lined up like that. Not with the house dark and quiet around them. Something moved low and cold through him. Not a thought yet. Not even fear. Just the feeling that the night had tilted by 1 degree and would not tilt back. He stood there another second, keys in hand, staring. Then he went up the steps and tried the knob out of reflex. Locked. He hated that his first instinct was still to be considerate. He set his suitcase down gently so it would not bang against the siding and risk waking Noah into one of those disoriented panic starts that could throw off the next whole day. He knocked once, then again, harder. Nothing. He pressed the doorbell. Inside, somewhere deep in the house, a chime sounded small and stupid. There was movement after that. Not quick movement, confused movement. Then the thin line of light under the door as someone crossed the hallway. Maya? His own voice came out lower than he expected. There was a pause, long enough to become a thing by itself. When the deadbolt finally turned, Maya opened the door only halfway, and for one dazed second, he saw exactly what he had meant to come home to. His wife standing there, in an oversized sleep shirt, hair flattened on one side, eyes thick with interrupted sleep. Then her face changed. It did not change into guilt all at once. That would have been easier. It went from sleep to confusion to recognition to something far worse. Fear, yes, but not the clean fear of being startled awake. Fear that arrived too fast, as if it had already been waiting under the surface for the sound of the bell. Ethan? He looked past her without meaning to. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent, dish soap, and the sweet chemical grape scent of the chewable melatonin Noah's pediatrician had suggested on rough nights. The lamp over the stove was on. One of Noah's color-coded cups sat upside down by the sink. His dinosaur backpack was hanging from the chair where Maya always kept it ready for morning therapy. Everything ordinary, everything in place. "What are you doing here?" she asked. The question struck him strangely. Not "you're home" or "what happened" or even "is everything okay?" Just that. Came home. He heard the flatness in his own voice and hated it. "We finished early." She did not move. His eyes dropped to her hand on the edge of the door. It was trembling. Not wildly, not in some movie way. Just enough to make the brass latch click softly against the strike plate. "Maya, I didn't know you were flying back tonight." He looked over her shoulder again. Down the hallway, the bedroom door was not closed all the way. And there it was. The thing inside him that had not yet become a thought finally hardening into one. He pushed the door wider. She caught his wrist with both hands. "Ethan, wait!" He stared at her. Not because she was strong enough to stop him, because she had tried. Whatever color had been left in her face was gone now. Her mouth moved once before sound came out. "Please." He pulled free and went in. The bedroom light was off, but the hall light reached far enough in to make shapes out of everything. The unmade bed, his duffel left open in the corner from his last trip, Maya's cardigan over the chair, and a man standing beside the bed in shirt sleeves, one hand at his cuff. For half a second, Ethan did not recognize him. The image refused to fit any slot his brain had ready. It was too wrong, like seeing a dentist in your shower or a pastor sitting at your kitchen table with your bills spread out. Then the face settled into itself. Grant Holloway. Grant from the office in pressed white shirts and polished boots. Grant who remembered Noah's name, who once brought back a toy road grader because he had heard Noah liked construction vehicles more than cartoons. Grant who had put a hand on Ethan's shoulder in front of the whole team when he got promoted and said, "You earned this." Grant looked less rumpled than a man standing in another man's bedroom at 2 a.m. had any right to look. His tie was gone, shirt partly unbuttoned, belt loose by one notch, but his expression was already collecting itself. That calm did more damage than panic would have. Ethan did not say anything. He could not. All the words that should have existed for a moment like this seemed to have passed around him and left him empty. Behind him, Maya made a sound with no shape in it. Grant glanced once toward the hallway, then back at Ethan. "Ethan," he said quietly. That voice, the same measured tone from site meetings, scheduling calls, budget reviews. As if this, too, might be handled by keeping everyone reasonable. Ethan stepped fully into the room. Grant lifted one hand slightly, not defensive exactly, more like he was signaling for space. "Let's not wake your son." The sentence landed with such precise obscenity that Ethan almost laughed. Instead, he turned and he walked back into the hall because if he stayed in that room 1 second longer, he was going to put Grant through the wall. He knew it. Not in some theatrical fantasy. In the simple, ugly way a body knows its next movement. By the time they got to the living room, Maya was crying hard enough to make her breath catch. Grant came out after them, fastening one cuff with deliberate fingers. Ethan stood by the coffee table and stared at the couch as if he had never seen it before. There was one of Noah's toy cars under the end table, a laminated therapy schedule on the counter. The weighted lap pad Maya sometimes used with Noah during hard afternoons lay folded over the arm of the recliner. On the shelf by the television sat the framed photo from last Christmas. Noah in Ethan's lap, Maya leaning into his shoulder, both of them smiling in a way that now looked less false than impossible. Grant remained standing. Maya lowered herself onto the couch and bent over with both hands over her face. No one spoke. Outside, somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. Ethan kept waiting for the world to split visibly, for some outward sign that this room was no longer a room he had left 6 days ago. But the refrigerator hummed. The air vent kicked on. Maya's crying broke and caught and quieted. The whole house went on existing around the fact of him. He looked at Grant. Grant held his gaze. There was apology in his face maybe, but not shame. Not enough, not even close. And because Ethan still could not find the right words, Grant used the silence. "Don't make this harder than it already is," he said. Ethan blinked once, as if he had misheard him. Maya made a muffled sound. "Please don't." Grant ignored her. "I know how this looks." Ethan let out one breath through his nose. It was almost a laugh again. "How this looks?" Grant kept going, quiet, controlled. "You have every right to be angry at me." At me. Not at us, not at her. Ethan heard the calculation and even that. "But don't put this all on Maya." That finally knocked something loose. Ethan looked at him and found his voice, though it came out scraped raw. "Get out." Grant did not move. "Maya didn't ask for, get out." She didn't start this. That was when Ethan turned toward Maya, because the sentence had been spoken as if she were not sitting 6 feet away, as if the two of them could negotiate the shape of her guilt without her. She was still bent forward, hair fallen over her face, shoulders jerking. Ethan stared at her and waited for her to say no, to say he was lying, to say anything clean enough to stand on. She did not. Grant's next words came into the room with the same calm, and maybe that was what made them unforgettable. "I liked her before anything happened," he said. "And she was trying to think about your family, about what you needed." Ethan looked back at him slowly. Grant met his eyes as if explaining a hard business reality to a younger employee. "Nothing comes free, Ethan. That's not how the world works." For a second, Ethan thought he might actually be sick. The promotion, the raise. The way Grant had singled him out, pushed him forward, asked after Noah's evaluations and therapy hours, insisted Ethan put Maya and Noah on the list for the company lake weekend because families should come. The gift basket after Noah's diagnosis review. The toy truck. The concern. The hand on Ethan's shoulder. The quiet talks in the office about leadership, potential, responsibility. The whole year opened under his feet like rotten boards. Maya was shaking her head now, crying harder. Stop, please stop. But Ethan was not looking at her. He was looking at the bookshelf by the television. A yellow toy excavator sat there, one of the little die-cast machines. Grant had brought Noah back from Albuquerque because he had remembered the brand Noah liked. Noah had lined up his trucks by size for weeks after that. Maya had said, laughing a little, "Your boss is too generous." And Ethan, stupid and grateful and tired, had said, "I know, he really didn't need to do all that." He felt his face change then, not into rage exactly, into something drier and worse. Grant seemed to see it. I'm not saying this well. Ethan almost admired the sentence for how small it was compared to the room they were in. Maya looked up at last. Her face was blotched and wet, her eyes swollen. "Ethan?" He held up a hand without looking at her. She stopped. It was not authority, it was the shock of discovering he still had enough force in him to stop one person in the room. Grant straightened a fraction. "You need to calm down. Tonight is not the time to decide anything. Sleep. Think in the morning." There it was again. That managerial tone, that presumption that the night itself belonged to him. That he could step into Ethan's house, into his marriage, into the wreckage he had made and still position himself as the adult in charge of next steps. Ethan took one step toward him. Grant stopped speaking. "Open the door," Ethan said. Grant's jaw tightened, just enough to show he had heard the shift. He glanced once toward Maya, perhaps expecting her to intervene. She did not. He picked up his jacket from the armchair. Ethan had not even noticed it there before. A navy blazer draped over fabric they had bought on sale 2 summers ago. After Noah spilled juice on the old chair and Maya cried because they could not afford another one until tax season, Grant moved toward the door. Ethan followed close enough to smell his cologne, citrus and cedar, something expensive and restrained. At the threshold, Grant turned back. It might have been wiser if he had said nothing, if he had left with whatever dignity remained. But maybe men like him only knew how to keep shaping a thing until the end. "I'm sorry," Oni said, "for how this happened. Not for doing it. Not for a year. Not for your house, your wife, your son, asleep down the hall while I stood in your bedroom. Just for how it happened." Ethan opened the door. The desert night pressed in, cool and black and wide. Grant stepped past him, put on his shoes with swift, practical movements, and straightened. The porch light caught silver at his temples. Then he walked away. Ethan stood there until the taillights disappeared. Only after the silence closed over the street again did he realize Maya had come up behind him. Not touching him. Just there, close enough that he could hear the broken rhythm of her breathing. He shut the door. When he turned, she was standing near the sofa, arms folded tight across herself, like someone cold in a house that was not cold. He looked at her then, really looked. At the sleep shirt wrinkled under the strain of her crossed arms. At the damp hair clinging to the side of her neck. At the face he had known in fluorescent grocery store aisles and pediatric waiting rooms and across half-eaten dinners after Noah finally settled down. The face that had watched him leave for work before sunrise and come home dusted with red dirt and tired enough to eat standing up. He searched it for an answer that could keep the room from becoming what it had become. Nothing in it could. Behind her in the soft yellow light from the kitchen, the little excavator still sat on the shelf. Ethan looked from that to Maya and back again, and the whole year rearranged itself so violently in his head that he had to put one hand against the wall to steady himself. Maya opened her mouth. He did not know if she meant to apologize, confess, beg, explain. He did not know which would be worse. She did not get the chance. Noah made a small sound down the hall in his sleep, just one strained cry, and then silence again. The house held still around it. Ethan lowered his hand from the wall. Maya stood by the couch like someone who had caused a collision and had not yet seen the full wreckage. And somewhere between the closing of the door and the quiet from Noah's room, Ethan understood with a clarity so cold it almost felt clean that whatever came next would not be about surviving the night. It would be about morning, about the kitchen, about Noah's breakfast, his shoes, his therapy binder, his need for sameness, about whether Ethan could stand in this house after what had just happened and still know what anything in it meant. He looked once more at Maya, then past her, at the ordinary room full of objects other people would never notice. The toy truck, the weighted pad, the framed photo, the cup by the sink, a whole year of gratitude laid out in plain sight. When he finally moved, it was not toward her. It was toward the living room chair opposite the couch, as if distance were the only thing in the house he could still control, what she calls sacrifice. In the morning, the kitchen was too bright. Arizona sun came hard through the cheap blinds over the sink, striping the counter, the coffee maker, the stack of Noah's plastic plates in the drying rack. Ethan stood in the doorway for a second, one hand still on the frame, as if he'd walked into the wrong house by mistake and might still back out before anyone saw him there. Maya was at the counter in yesterday's sweatpants and one of his old gray t-shirts. She had her hair pulled back badly, loose pieces falling at her neck. The coffee maker hissed and clicked between them. She had already poured him a mug. That part almost made him turn around. The mug sat where it always sat, slightly to the right of the toaster because he reached with his left hand first when he was tired. She had added the splash of cream he liked without asking. He stared at it and could not touch it. Noah's cereal bowl was out too. His blue one, not the green one. Maya had remembered the order of the week. Blue on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Green on Mondays. Noah did better when small things stayed where they belonged. Maya turned when she felt him there. For half a second, something crossed her face that did not belong to this morning at all. Some reflex of the old life. Relief that he was up, that they were beginning the day, that there was still a version of normal to move through. Then it fell away. "You should eat something," she said. He did not answer. The coffee smell filled the room too heavily. Dark roast, slightly burnt. The same cheap grounds they always bought because the better kind was for weekends if there was extra money, and there usually wasn't. On the table sat Noah's visual schedule, Velcro-backed cards lined up in a strip. Breakfast, brush teeth, get dressed, school, therapy. Ethan looked at the tiny icons and had the sudden, ugly thought that a child's day made more sense than an adult's. He crossed the kitchen and moved the untouched mug out of his way so he could lean both hands on the counter. Maya watched him do it. "I didn't sleep," she said. He almost said, "I'm glad somebody told the truth in this house." But Noah's bedroom door was still closed down the hall, and the line died before it reached his mouth. The air conditioner kicked on. The vent rattled. Somewhere outside, a truck backed up with the slow mechanical beep common to every construction site in the state. He had heard that sound almost every day of his working life. This morning, it seemed to come from a distance too far away to matter. Maya wiped her hands on a dish towel already twisted wet at the ends. "He'll be up soon." Ethan nodded once. It was not agreement, just acknowledgement of a fact. Noah would wake up. He would want the same spoon he always used. He would resist the wrong socks. He would ask whether today was school day or home day or speech day. The day would come whether Ethan wanted it to or not. Maya took a breath and then let it out carefully as if she had practiced that much. "I know there's nothing I can say that makes this..." He looked at her. She stopped. The pause between them widened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the miserable kind two people make when neither wants to step first into the ruined part of the room. Finally, she said quieter, "You should let me explain." He gave a short nod that meant, "Go ahead, if this is what you call explaining." Maya looked down at the dish towel, and it wasn't... He waited. She tried again. "He started calling more after that dinner with you. Not calling, I guess. Texting, asking about Noah, asking if you made it home late. Dumb stuff, just..." She shook her head. Things that didn't feel like anything at first. Ethan's hand stayed flat on the counter. At first. The phrase moved through him and lodged. Maya kept her eyes down. "I didn't encourage it." He said nothing. "I didn't." He looked at the coffee mug she had poured for him and said, "You want me to answer that?" Her mouth tightened. "No." From down the hall came a mattress squeak, then a rhythmic thump against the wall. Noah, awake, kicking one heel as he lay there, orienting himself. Ethan knew that sound. Noah often stayed in bed a minute after waking, not ready to move until the room felt arranged properly in his head. Both of them turned toward the hallway automatically. The movement disgusted Ethan with its normalcy. Maya stepped toward the cabinet, took down the box of cereal, then stopped halfway through opening it. "Can we not do this in front of him?" He looked at her. "Do what?" She swallowed. "Like this." He almost asked what exactly this meant. Finding your boss in your bedroom, or having to stand in your own kitchen the next morning, pretending words were still clean enough to use. Instead, he said, "Then talk before he gets out here." She went still. The thump came again from Noah's room. Then silence. Maya set the cereal box on the counter and gripped the edge hard enough that the cardboard bowed in. "He came on to me. That's the truth." Ethan said, "That all of it?" "No." He looked at her fully then, and she flinched. Not from him exactly, but from being held in one place by the fact of his attention. "No," she said again, thinner this time, "not all of it." The bedroom door opened. Noah shuffled into the hall barefoot, hair standing up in the back, wearing the same red pajama shirt he had gone to bed in. He stopped when he saw Ethan in the kitchen, and his whole face changed. "Dad?" That should have broken something open in Ethan, but all he felt at first was a hard rush of relief that had nowhere to go. Noah crossed the kitchen at an angle too fast to be casual, bumped into Ethan's hip, and wrapped both arms around his waist without warning. Ethan put his hand on the back of Noah's head. "You're home early," Noah said into his shirt. "Yeah." "Why?" "Work finished." Noah pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You didn't tell me." "No, I didn't." Noah considered that, then looked toward the counter. "Blue bowl?" Maya said too brightly. "Already out." Noah glanced between them. Kids noticed weather before language. Ethan saw it in the way Noah's shoulders tightened, the way he hovered 1 second longer than he needed to. Then he climbed into his chair and started tapping 2 fingers against the table beside the visual schedule. Maya poured cereal. Ethan got milk from the fridge because his body still knew where things were and what mornings required. Noah asked for the spoon with the dinosaur on the handle. Maya had accidentally set out the plain, stainless one. Ethan swapped them without comment. Noah ate 3 bites, then looked up. "Dad, are you staying today?" Ethan's throat felt thick for no good reason. "I'm here this morning." "School?" "Yeah, you still have school." Noah frowned at that. "You're not driving?" "Mom's driving." Noah accepted that after a second, though not happily. He went back to his cereal, but he was listening with his whole body now. Maya poured herself coffee and did not drink it. Ethan took out Noah's lunchbox and checked the side pocket for the chewy tube he sometimes needed on overstimulating days. It was already there. Maya had packed it last night, or maybe yesterday afternoon, or maybe sometime before his flight landed and before Grant took his shoes off by the door. Time had turned strange enough that Ethan no longer trusted objects to belong to the right hour. Noah finished eating and slid off the chair. "Bathroom," Maya said. "I know." He did know. He went because the order was the order. Ethan watched him disappear down the hall, then heard the faucet come on full blast, heard Maya follow and say gently, "Not so much water, baby." The domesticity of it made Ethan want to smash something. Instead, he opened the dishwasher and closed it again without unloading a single plate. When Maya came back into the kitchen, she moved more carefully now, as if the few minutes of Noah's presence had reminded her that the house had edges. "He did start it," she said. "I'm not lying about that." Ethan leaned back against the counter. "Okay." She looked at him sharply as if the word itself had struck her. "What does that mean?" "It means I heard you." "That's not the same as, No," he said, "it's not." She stared at him, waiting for more. When none came, her shoulders dropped a fraction. He started texting, then finding reasons to stop by, asking if you were home, if Noah needed anything, if I needed help with... She broke off and looked away. I told him no, a lot. Ethan's gaze settled on a tiny crack in the laminate countertop. They had meant to fix it with one of those cheap repair kits and never had. "A lot," he repeated. She flinched at the repetition. "He knew what he was doing," she said. "He knew exactly when to show up, when you were on site 12 hours, when Noah had a bad week, when I hadn't slept, when I..." She stopped. "When you what?" Maya looked toward the hallway before answering, though Noah was still brushing his teeth, humming off-key to himself in the bathroom. "When I was too tired to keep saying the same thing." Ethan let that sit between them. The phone on the counter buzzed once. Both of them looked at it. Grant Holloway. The name on the screen was enough to make the whole kitchen feel newly contaminated. Maya's hand twitched. Ethan reached first and turned the phone face down without answering. The buzz stopped, then started again. He let it ring all the way through. Maya's voice came out small. "You should maybe tss." He looked at her. She stopped. From the bathroom, Noah called, "Mom, this toothpaste tastes weird." Maya shut her eyes for 1 second. "Use the other one, baby. The bubblegum one." "I don't want bubblegum." "Then rinse and I'll come help." Noah muttered something under his breath. The faucet came on again. Ethan turned the phone back over, missed call. A message banner appeared almost at once. "Call me when you can. We need to talk calmly." He stared at the words. Calmly. Like there was still an agreed-upon category for what had happened. Like the problem was his tone. Maya was watching his face now, not the screen. What did he say? He did not answer. He set the phone down. She took a step closer. "Ethan." He turned to her so fast she stopped. "You want to explain?" he said. "Explain." She folded her arms over herself. "I am trying." "Then don't give me the cleaned-up version." "I'm not." He laughed once without humor, and "You're giving me the one you can live with." Color rose in her face. "You think I'm protecting myself right now?" He stared at her. "Yes," he said. The word hung there. Noah came back into the kitchen with wet hands and one sock half on. Ethan bent automatically, pulled the sock straight, and rolled it over Noah's heel. Noah swayed against his shoulder for a second. More trust than weight. "Shoes," Ethan said. Noah went to the mat by the back door where his school sneakers waited. He picked up the wrong one first, noticed, corrected it. Ethan watched his concentration, the careful seriousness in it. Small things mattered. Sequence mattered. A voice raised one notch too high could throw him sideways for an hour. Maya packed Noah's lunch into his backpack. Ethan zipped it closed. They moved around each other like people in a drill they had done too many times. At the door, Noah looked up at Ethan again. "Are you here when I get home?" Ethan looked past him at the morning outside, the hard light already whitening the street. "I don't know yet," he said. Noah didn't like that answer. It showed in his face at once. Maya jumped in too quickly. "Dad's just figuring out work stuff." Noah studied them both. Then he pressed his palm hard over one ear. A small, self-soothing move he had started doing in the past year when rooms felt wrong. Ethan crouched down. "Hey!" Noah looked at him. "You go to school, then speech, then home." He tapped the icons on the schedule clipped to Noah's backpack as he said them. "Same as Tuesday." Noah's hand slowly dropped from his ear. "Same as Tuesday," he repeated. "Yeah." Maya opened the door, and the heat came in already dry and bright. Noah went out first. Maya followed with the backpack. At the threshold, she turned back. "Please don't leave." Ethan looked at her over Noah's head. "I'm taking him to school," she said. "Just don't go anywhere before I get back." It was the first thing she had asked from him all morning that sounded like the truth of what she wanted. Not forgiveness, not understanding, not even a conversation. Just that he'd still be here when she returned. He didn't answer. She waited a beat, saw she wasn't getting one, and left. The house emptied with surprising speed. The silence that followed wasn't the same as the night before. It had edges now. Morning sounds filtered in. A lawn service trailer rattling somewhere nearby. A siren several streets over. The neighbor's garage door grinding open. Ethan stood in the kitchen and looked at the mess of breakfast. One blue bowl in the sink. Milk ring drying around the bottom. Maya's coffee untouched. His own mug still full. Skin forming over the cream. He took his phone from the counter and carried it into the living room without meaning to. He sat on the far end of the sofa, the same place he had not slept. The phone buzzed again. This time he answered and said nothing. Grant's voice came through at once, low and composed. "Ethan." Ethan ended the call. A second later, the voicemail notification appeared. He almost deleted it without listening. Instead, he set the phone face up on the coffee table and stared at it until the little symbol stopped feeling like an object and started feeling like a dare. Maya came back 40 minutes later. He heard the car first, then the front door, then the careful pause she made before coming fully into the room. She found him in the same place, still dressed, still unshaven, still not having decided what shape the day should take. "I took him in," she said unnecessarily, but he was okay once we got there. Ethan nodded. Maya stood by the armchair, fingers worrying the hem of her shirt. Without Noah in the house, there was no practical choreography left to hide inside. The room looked larger and worse. She said, "I didn't love him." Ethan kept his eyes on the phone. She took another breath. "I need you to know that." He looked up finally. "Then what was it?" The question came out quiet enough that she had to hear all of it. Not a shout, not an accusation with somewhere easy to push back, just the stripped thing itself. Maya's face changed. She looked suddenly younger and more tired at once. "I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound... Try." She sat down on the armchair, but only on the edge, as if prepared to stand again. At first, it was just him talking, not like your boss, not like... She wiped at her face, though she wasn't crying yet. "Not like the way people talk to moms when they find out your kid needs extra help." "He didn't do that voice." Ethan said nothing. "He looked at me like I was still..." She stopped. "Still what?" "I don't know." She shook her head hard, angry now at herself or him or both. A person. Not just Noah's schedule. Not just your wife, not just the one home all day figuring out insurance calls and which foods he'd eat that week, and whether the school aide actually read the IEP. Ethan's mouth pulled tight. The room went very quiet. Maya saw the look and rushed in the wrong direction with it immediately. "That's not what I mean." "It's what you said." No, Ethan, no, I'm saying he knew how to talk to me when I was worn down. That's what I'm saying." He leaned back and looked at the ceiling for a second. The fan above them ticked faintly with each turn. "Did you want him?" Maya shut her eyes. He waited. When she opened them, she looked like someone standing barefoot on something sharp. "No," she said first. Then, because it wasn't enough, she added, "Not like that." The qualification sat in the room like a stain. Ethan turned his head toward her slowly. She made a helpless motion with both hands. "I'm trying to tell you the truth." "No," he said. "You're trying to tell it without hearing yourself." Her face crumpled, then said again. "He kept pushing. He knew when you were gone. He knew when things were bad here. He knew when Noah had those weeks where everything felt impossible. He knew he needed money. He knew you were up for promotion. He knew all of it." Ethan looked at her and felt something flatten inside him. There were many questions. Too many. How long? Where else? Who knew? What promises? What did Grant think he'd bought? What did Maya think she was trading? Which nights of the last year had been his life, and which had been performance? But another question forced itself out first. So what? He said. You just let it happen because he could help me. Maya went completely still. For a second, he thought she wouldn't answer at all. Then she said in a voice so low he almost missed it, I thought I was protecting this family. The word struck him so cleanly it was almost physical. Protecting. As if there were a shelter inside it. As if what she had done could still be folded into the language of care. He laughed once, short and ugly, protecting. Maya's eyes filled immediately. I know how it sounds. Do you? She got to her feet. You think I don't know what I did? I think you're still naming it like you get to survive it. That landed, he saw it land. Maya took one step back as if he had shoved her, though he hadn't moved. The phone on the coffee table lit up again. This time Grant did not call, he left a voicemail. Notification, new message. Ethan picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Maya said, don't. He looked at her. Why? Because whatever he says, it'll only What? Make this worse? She didn't answer. He opened the voicemail and put the phone to his ear. Grant's voice came through smooth and controlled, as if recorded from a conference room instead of from the edge of another man's marriage. Ethan, I know last night was a shock. I'm sorry. I mean that. Don't do anything today you can't take back. Take a breath. Stay home if you need to. We'll figure out the work side when you're ready. Call me back before you make any decisions. Ethan listened all the way to the end. Then he played it again. Maya stood across from him, crying silently now, one hand over her mouth. The second time through, the words changed shape. We'll figure out the work side, as if work were still his to manage, as if Grant were doing him another favor by offering structure. When the message ended, Ethan lowered the phone. He did not delete it. Maya said, please don't go in today. He looked at her. There was fear in her face now that was not only about him leaving the house. It was about the next step, whoever took it first. No, he said. She stared at him, not understanding. I'm not going in. The relief that flashed through her was too fast to hide. It made him hate her a little. Not because she was relieved, because he could not tell what exactly she was relieved for. He stood and reached for his work phone charger on the side table. I'm taking the day, maybe more. For what? He almost said for this, but even now that seemed too vague, too clean. Instead he said, because I can't walk in there and act normal. Maya wiped at her face. Ethan, He cut her off without raising his voice. I'm not doing one more thing for him today. That silenced her. He went to the bedroom doorway and stopped before crossing it. The bed inside was remade. Maya must have done it after Noah left. The neatness of it was unbearable. He turned away and went back to the living room instead. By evening, the sunlight had gone out of the house and left behind that dim Arizona gray that made every room feel unfinished. Noah was home and fed and calmer. The schedule had carried him through the day, mostly. Ethan had spoken when needed, not when not. Maya had moved carefully around both of them, trying not to scrape against anything raw. Now the house was dark, except for the television glow from Noah's room and the lamp over the stove. Ethan lay on the sofa in jeans and a t-shirt, one arm over his eyes, his work phone on his chest. At some point, Maya had gone down the hall to settle Noah for the night. He could hear the murmur of her voice through the wall, then quiet. He lifted the phone and played the voicemail again. Take a breath. Stay home if you need to. We'll figure out the work side when you're ready. He listened without moving. When it ended, he did not delete it. He did not call back. He let the dark room keep the message with him, as if hearing Grant's voice in his own house were the only honest shape the night could take. You don't get to leave clean. By 10:30, the sun was already high enough to bleach the parking lot white. Ethan sat in his truck for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel and the engine still running, staring at the row of dusty pickups, the chain-link fence around the equipment yard, the long portable office trailers with their shallow aluminum steps and narrow windows. Nothing had changed. Forklifts still moved in the distance. Somebody in a reflective vest crossed the gravel carrying a clipboard and a coffee the size of a paint can. A cement mixer turned slowly at the back of the lot, its drum revolving with the dull patience of machinery that did not care what men brought into work with them. He killed the engine and sat a second longer anyway. He had not shaved. He had changed shirts twice before leaving the house because both the first one and the second one felt like something a man from yesterday would wear. Maya had asked him from the kitchen, but not too close, if he wanted her to pack him anything to eat. He had looked at her until she stopped speaking. Now, with the truck off and the heat already starting to gather under the windshield, he took the folded leave form from the passenger seat and slid it into the folder he'd brought from home. Long-term unpaid leave if HR approved it. Resignation if they didn't. He had filled out both, then tucked the resignation behind the leave request like one knife behind another. The thought of walking in there made his mouth taste metallic. Yesterday morning, Maya had said, "I thought I was protecting this family." The sentence had followed him into sleep and back out of it. It had been under the shower, in the mirror, in the silence while Noah lined up his shoes by the door this morning and asked whether Dad had to go to the dirt office today. Ethan had said yes because there had to be one thing in the house that still matched its name. He opened the truck door and stepped into the heat. The air smelled like dust, diesel, hot rubber, and something faintly chemical from the asphalt patching material stored along the far fence. Arizona had a way of making everything feel exposed. Nothing stayed soft by late morning. The light took the top layer off things. Inside the main trailer office, the air conditioning hit him too cold and too fast. Fluorescent light flattened the room. Phones rang. Someone laughed at a desk near the back. A printer chattered. The normalcy of it was obscene in a quieter way than the house had been. Here it wasn't personal, it was institutional. The same routines, the same calendar pinned up behind reception with project deadlines marked in red. The same whiteboard with site assignments. The same stale smell of coffee and toner and industrial carpet. Rita from the front office looked up as he came in. She was in her late 40s maybe, tidy in the same way she always was, with reading glasses hanging on a chain at her chest and a pen already in hand before anyone asked for anything. Ethan had known her for 3 years and could not remember once seeing her flustered. She handled timesheets, benefits paperwork, lost badge forms, all the small humiliations that made a company run. "Ethan," she said, giving him a quick once-over that paused on his face a fraction too long to be nothing. "You back already?" "Yeah." "How'd Flagstaff go?" "Fine." Rita nodded as if she had heard both the answer and the lack of one. "Grant's in." Of course he was. Ethan felt his grip tighten around the folder. "I need HR forms." "For leave?" He gave a short nod. She reached automatically for a drawer, then hesitated. Medical, family, personal? The categories felt absurd. He almost laughed. Instead, he said, "Personal." She drew out a stack, thumbed through it, then stopped halfway. "You know you can also do some of this through the portal." "I know." That made her glance up again, not nosy, just human. "You okay?" He looked at her, and for a second, he almost said something useless like, "No, not really." Just because the question had been asked in an ordinary voice by someone whose only power over him extended to paperwork and toner cartridges. Instead, he said, "Need a couple days." Rita slid the forms toward him. "If you want me to flag payroll on timing, I can. Thanks." He took the forms, though he already had versions in the folder. "Do you want to use the conference room?" she asked. "It's empty right now." The kindness of that irritated him at once. Not because it was false, but because it was too small for the thing he was carrying. A conference room. A quiet place to fill out his forms while the floor under his life kept moving. "No," he said, "I'm good." He turned before she could ask anything else. Men at 2 desks down from drafting were arguing mildly about delivery timing. Somebody had a sports radio stream playing low on a phone speaker. One of the junior estimators lifted a hand at Ethan and said, "Hey, man," without looking closely enough to understand he shouldn't. Ethan kept walking. The hallway to the executive offices was only a short stretch of glass and drywall. But by the time he reached it, he was aware of every noise his boots made on the vinyl tile. At the far end, Grant's office door stood open. Grant was inside, jacket off, reading glasses on, looking over a set of updated site maps spread across his desk. For one impossible second, before Grant lifted his head, Ethan saw the version of the man he had known first. Controlled, competent, absorbed in work. The kind of man other men mistook for solid because he never wasted movement. Then Grant saw him. He didn't startle. That would have required guilt to rise faster than discipline. He took off his glasses, set them down, and stood. Ethan. The sound of his name in that room made something dry move under Ethan's skin. Grant came around the desk a step, not far enough to crowd, just far enough to signal openness. "Come in." Ethan stayed where he was. Grant waited half a beat, then nodded once as if he were indulging a difficult employee in a meeting that had gone sideways. "All right." The office was glass on 2 sides, blinds half drawn against the glare. On the credenza behind Grant sat framed photos Ethan had seen before and never really registered. Grant in golf clothes with 2 teenage boys. Grant and a blonde woman at what looked like a charity dinner. Grant on a fishing boat. Broad smile. Expensive sunglasses. Family. Respectability. Leisure. Ethan hated the photos on site. He stepped in at last because standing in the hallway while office traffic moved around them felt worse. Grant shut the door halfway, not fully. Even that had calculation in it. I figured you'd come by today, Grant said. Ethan said nothing. Grant leaned a hand on the edge of his desk. I'm not going to insult you by pretending last night didn't happen. The sentence almost passed for honest. That was the problem with him. He could say half a true thing and make a room tilt around it. Ethan held the folder against his thigh. I'm not here to talk about last night. Grant's eyes dropped to the folder, then back to his face. You're here for leave. Ethan said, I'm here because I'm not walking onto a site from this office and acting like nothing happened. Grant nodded as if that were reasonable, and I understand. The words came out so smooth, Ethan nearly told him to stop speaking in complete sentences. Grant stayed where he was, voice level. If you need time, take time. We can structure it however makes the most sense. Personal leave, reduced schedule. We can move you off the freeway package and onto something smaller for a while. Structure it. Move you. As if Ethan's pain were another staffing issue to be managed. He set the folder on the nearest chair instead of handing it over. I'm taking leave. For how long? I don't know. Grant gave a thoughtful nod, the same one he used in planning meetings when someone proposed changing a delivery sequence. All right, that's workable. Ethan stared at him. Grant seemed to interpret the silence as permission to continue. You don't need to make any bigger decisions today. There was something almost mesmerizing about how he kept placing calm where shame should have been. Like he believed order itself could erase the content. Ethan said, You don't get to tell me what I need. Grant's mouth tightened slightly, then smoothed. Fair enough. The air conditioner hummed overhead. Somewhere out on the main floor, a phone rang and rang until someone picked it up. Through the blinds, the parking lot flickered white. Grant lowered his voice. I am sorry. I need you to hear that. Ethan looked at him and thought, No, you need to say it in a room where it helps you. Grant went on, careful now. What happened between me and Maya should never have touched your work. Ethan actually smiled at that, but there was no humor in it. Grant saw it and kept going anyway. I'm saying I understand if you need distance from me professionally. We can make that happen. Distance. From the man who had stood in Ethan's bedroom, tucking in his shirt. Ethan felt the shape of the room sharpen around him. The edge of the desk. The silver frame of the family photo. The pale lines of sun under the blinds. You can make that happen, he repeated. Grant took a breath as if recalibrating. If you want a different reporting line, I can shift some things. Can you? It'll complicate the freeway job, but yes. The folder on the chair seemed to weigh more than paper should. Ethan had come in here thinking there would be one clean act he could do. Put down the leave form. Refuse eye contact. Walk out. Let the action itself mean something. But Grant kept stepping ahead of him, turning every move into something administratively reasonable. Temporary, managed, a matter of options. It was like being robbed by a man who kept offering you chairs. Grant glanced toward the folder. Have you talked to Maya today? Ethan's head came up fast enough that Grant stopped. Don't, Ethan said. Grant lifted one hand. All right. No apology in it, just a tactical retreat. After a beat, Grant said, I'm trying to keep this from becoming worse than it already is. Worse. Ethan looked toward the glass wall and saw his own reflection faintly overlaid on the parking lot outside. A man in a wrinkled shirt, holding himself too still. He thought of Noah's therapy folder on the kitchen counter, the weekly OT bill, the specialist copay, the insurance portal Maya cursed at every other month when some claim coded wrong. He thought of the benefits card in his wallet, used so many times he no longer looked at it as a card, only as the small plastic hinge between the family and financial freefall. As if reading part of that thought from his face, Grant said gently, Before you do anything final, think through the insurance piece. That was the moment the office changed. It was not loud. Nothing visible shifted. But the space inside Ethan's chest narrowed all at once, like a door pulled in halfway. Grant went on. Same tone, same measured care. Noah's services are expensive. You know that. The market's not exactly forgiving right now. And if you walk away without another position lined up, Ethan took one step forward. Grant stopped speaking. The two of them stood in the careful cold of the office with the sound of the air vent between them. Ethan said very softly, Did you just bring up my son? Grant did not answer right away. That was answer enough. Finally, he said, I'm being realistic. There it was. The word he used when he wanted force to pass as reason. Ethan could feel his pulse in the back of his neck now, not racing, not cinematic, just beating too hard in too small a place. Grant spoke more slowly as if slowing would make it safer. I'm not threatening you. Ethan laughed once under his breath. No? No, Grant straightened. I'm telling you to think past today. Past today. Ethan, you don't get to say his name. Grant's jaw tightened. The first real crack. Small, but there. A knock came against the half-open door. Rita leaned in just enough to be visible, holding a file. "Sorry," she said, seeing both their faces and instantly regretting the interruption without understanding it. "I just need Grant's signature on the subcontractor release before noon." Grant did not look away from Ethan. "Leave it." Rita set the file on the credenza and withdrew with a murmur of thanks. The interruption made the room worse, not better. It restored the office to its public reality. Papers still needed signing. Deadlines still held. Other people still occupied the same building while this was happening. Ethan picked up the folder from the chair and held it out at last. Grant took it, looked at the top page, then the second behind it. Leave request in front, resignation behind. His eyes flicked once to Ethan's face. "You're not ready to do this today," he said. Ethan stared at him. Grant tapped the papers lightly with one finger. "These are two different decisions. I know what they are. Then don't collapse them into one bad morning." Bad morning. The phrase hit with a stupidity so breathtaking, Ethan almost lost track of the rest. Grant had reduced the wreckage of his marriage and career into a scheduling problem caused by poor timing. Grant set the folder down on the desk instead of signing anything. "Take the leave. Let HR process it. Don't resign in anger." Something in Ethan wanted to sweep the whole desk clean. Maps, framed photos, pen cup, all of it. But even standing there, he could see the next consequences in sequence the way he saw a site failure once the first support went wrong. Security, report, public version, unstable man, personal issues, judgment compromised. Grant was counting on that too. The knowledge did not calm him. It trapped him more neatly. When Ethan didn't answer, Grant softened his voice a degree further. "Go home. Stay with your family. We can revisit everything else next week." Family. Ethan looked at him and understood, not for the first time, but in a new and uglier register, that Grant believed language itself was a managerial tool. Not truth, not confession, just something to position with. He took the leave request from the desk and left the resignation where it was. Grant watched him do it. That was the worst part. Not the triumph. Grant was too disciplined for visible triumph. The recognition, the quiet registering of what had just happened. Ethan had not walked out clean. He had adjusted. Taken the version that preserved the insurance, preserved options, preserved Noah. The version a father would take. Grant said, "Rita can help push it through today." Ethan put the leave request back into the folder. "Don't do me favors." Grant's expression changed by less than an inch. "That's not what I'm doing." Ethan almost told him to go to hell. Instead, he said, "You don't know what you're doing." Then he turned and walked out before the sentence could turn into something smaller. The office floor hit him with noise and fluorescent light all over again. Somebody, by estimating, asked if he'd seen the revised traffic control memo. Another guy from operations lifted a coffee and greeting. Ethan moved through them as if he had already become difficult to see. Rita looked up from her desk when he approached. "You still want those forms processed?" she asked carefully. He slid the leave request across to her. She glanced at the top line. "Effective immediately?" "Yeah." "All right." She reached for her keyboard. "I'll flag it today." He stood there another second. Rita looked up again and, "You need me to hold anything else?" There was no curiosity in the question, just procedure shaped kindly. Ethan almost said no. Instead, he pulled his company fuel card and site keys from his pocket and set them on the counter. "Keep those for now." Rita glanced at the items, then at him. "You sure?" "No." That seemed to throw her more than any practiced answer would have. She nodded once. "I'll log them in." He thanked her without knowing whether he meant it. On the way out, he passed the wall near the break area where the company had started hanging framed photos from retreats, charity builds, safety milestones, and all the staged proof that work here was more than work. He had gone past them 100 times without seeing more than blurred color. Now one stopped him. Lake weekend, last summer. He remembered the trip only in pieces. Noah refusing sunscreen until Ethan let him apply it to Ethan first. Maya laughing once, real enough. Grant at the dock holding a paper plate and talking to 3 field guys at once, like every room widened naturally around him. In the photo, the whole scene had been made obedient. There was Ethan in a company polo, smiling toward the camera, one arm around Noah. Noah had on the noise-canceling headphones they packed for crowded places. Maya stood beside them, one hand resting on Noah's shoulder. Grant was just behind and between them, not touching anyone, close enough to be read as family friend, mentor, host, whatever version the viewer preferred. Ethan stared at the frame until the image stopped looking accidental. All at once, it seemed impossible that he had not noticed before how carefully Grant had placed himself near the edges of his life. Never too close in public, never enough to force interpretation, always just inside the picture. A year of gifts, advice, open doors, concern, access dressed as generosity. Someone brushed past Ethan with a muttered, "Sorry, man," carrying a rolled set of plans. The small contact snapped at the moment without undoing it. He walked out into the heat. The parking lot was blinding now. Sun bounced off windshields and trailer roofs and sheets. By the time he reached his truck, the back of his shirt was damp. He got in and shut the door. The cab held the stale baked smell of vinyl and old coffee. For a while, he did not start the engine. His wallet was in the cup holder where he had dropped it earlier. He pulled it open without thinking, and there it was behind his license and debit card. The insurance card, blue and white and corners worn. Ethan Carter. He held it between two fingers. Plastic, numbers, phone line, group ID, copay tiers, the invisible scaffolding under Noah's speech appointments, occupational therapy, pediatric specialist follow-ups, the prescriptions Maya picked up at the pharmacy after arguing with coverage codes. He stared at the card until the print blurred. When he finally leaned back in the seat, the truck stayed silent around him, the engine off, the sun pressing hard against the windshield. He did not start the truck. He did not call anyone. He sat there with the benefits card in his hand and understood, in a way that left no room to breathe, that leaving a man was not the same as leaving what he owned. The part she left out. By the time Ethan pulled into the driveway, the sky had gone the flat, bruised color Arizona got just before dark, surrendered for good. He sat in the truck for a moment with the engine off, one hand still on the key. The house glowed warm from the inside. Kitchen light, lamp in the living room, the television flickering blue somewhere farther back, probably Noah's show before bedtime. It looked exactly like a house a man could come home to. He hated that for a second. He could almost step into it. He took his wallet from the center console, thumbed past the bent insurance card, and shoved the whole thing back into his pocket. Grant's voice from the office had stayed with him all the way home. Not loud, not repeating, just settled somewhere in him like grit under a lid. You need to think through the insurance piece, not threat, realism. That was the part Ethan couldn't stop turning over. A man didn't need to raise his voice if he already held the right levers. When he stepped inside, the smell of chicken and rice met him first, and then Noah's voice from the living room, narrating something to himself in the bright, concentrated way he sometimes did when he was trying to hold on to a routine from both ends. Maya was at the stove. She turned before he shut the door. Not quickly, not with hope, just with the strained alertness of someone who had been listening for the lock. "You're back." He nodded once and set his keys on the counter. Noah looked up from the floor where he'd arranged his magnet tiles into a crooked square city. "Dad?" Ethan crossed the room before he could think about it and crouched down. Noah leaned into him hard, brief but certain, then pulled back and pointed to the structure. "This is the train station." "It looks good." "It kept falling." "Yeah? I fixed it." Ethan looked at the little walls and mismatched roof pieces. "You did." Noah liked that answer. He nodded and went back to work, tongue caught at one corner of his mouth. A cartoon played too loudly from the TV. Maya picked up the remote and turned it down without asking. The ordinary mercy of that small adjustment made Ethan feel tired clear through his bones. "Did he eat?" he asked. "Most of it," Maya said. "He had speech after school. He was wiped out by the time they got home." Ethan glanced at her and caught the correction in her face too late. Not they. She and Noah. The aide from aftercare. The therapist. Whoever had handed Noah off from one part of the day to the next, while Ethan sat in a parking lot with an insurance card in his hand like it explained anything. Maya said, "He took a shower already." Okay. The room went quiet again, except for the cartoon and the clack of Noah setting one tile against another too hard. Maya stirred the rice once, though it didn't need stirring. "You eat?" "Not there." She gave a short nod. "I can plate something." He looked at her until she set the spoon down. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't exactly true. His stomach hurt in the flat, sour way it did when he'd gone too long on coffee. But hunger belonged to a body that expected to be fed. He wasn't there yet. Noah made a frustrated sound and knocked over one side of the station. The tiles scattered. Ethan reached automatically and helped him stand two pieces back up before the frustration could crest into something harder to bring down. Noah accepted the help without looking at him. The tiny domestic motion felt unbearable. Maya saw it too. He could tell by the way she looked away. After Noah was in bed, after the toothbrush argument, after the third cup of water, after the long minute at the bedroom door, while Noah asked whether Dad would still be here in the morning, and Ethan said yes because he was not yet ready to break promises for reasons a 6-year-old couldn't understand, the house went small around them. The television was off. The dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was open, lamp on, bedspread turned down on one side. Maya stood in the doorway waiting for him as if she knew he wouldn't come in unless she stayed there long enough to force a choice. Ethan passed her anyway and went into the room. He didn't sit on the bed. He took the desk chair by the window, turned it halfway around, and sat with one forearm over the backrest. The room still smelled faintly of Maya's lotion and fabric softener, and something else he didn't want to name, because naming it would make the air itself unusable. Maya closed the door. She didn't lock it. The click of the latch was enough. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Outside, a car went by too fast on the main road. Someone somewhere in the neighborhood shut a garage door. The sounds came through the wall, dulled and ordinary. Ethan said, "He brought up Noah." Maya's face changed at once. "He what?" "At the office." She took a step farther into the room. "What did he say?" Ethan laughed once without amusement. "You sound worried." "I am worried." "About what?" She opened her mouth, then shut it. He watched her fail to answer and understood something before she said a word. It wasn't just fear of losing him. It wasn't even mostly that. Maya rubbed both hands over her arms. "What did he say?" "That I should think through the insurance piece." Ethan kept his voice level because if he didn't, it would go somewhere else. "That the market's bad, that Noah's services cost money, that I shouldn't do anything final." For a second, she looked almost sick. Not guilty, not just that. Afraid in a practical, immediate way. Like someone hearing the edge of a cliff described by a person standing already too close to it. Ethan leaned back in the chair. "Yeah." Maya stared at him. "He said that?" He did not answer because the answer was on his face already. She crossed one arm over her stomach and pressed her other hand over her mouth. The gesture lasted only a second before she pulled it down again, angry at herself for showing anything. "That's not," she began, then stopped. "That's not okay." "No?" She looked at him sharply, hearing the shape of his voice. "You didn't know he thought like that?" Ethan asked. Maya's eyes flicked away. There it was. He sat forward, elbows on his knees. "No, don't do that." "I'm not doing anything." "You just did." She shook her head too fast. "Ethan, no, you don't get to act surprised if you knew what kind of man he was when it suited you not to know." The words landed. He saw them land. Maya took a breath, held it, let it out. "I knew he liked having leverage." The room went still. Ethan looked at her and felt the last thin scrap of defensiveness he hadn't known he was still extending toward her begin to loosen. "Say that again." She didn't. He stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Maya flinched. "Say it again." "I said I knew he liked—" She stopped and looked down. "I knew he liked feeling useful." "Useful? Don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't stand there and repeat one word back at me like you're trying to skin it." He stared at her. Then he said more quietly than before, "Start at the beginning." Maya's face tightened. "I have." "No," he shook his head once. "You've given me pieces. Start at the beginning." She stayed where she was by the dresser as if distance might help her organize the lie into something survivable. "I told you. After that dinner with you, he started texting. Before the promotion." "Yes? How long before?" "A few weeks." "A few weeks," Ethan repeated. Maya braced both palms against the edge of the dresser. "He'd ask if you got home safe, or if Noah liked the toy truck, or if that pediatric appointment went okay. Things like that. And you answered. At first, yes. At first." She shut her eyes briefly. "I thought he was being kind." The sentence drifted between them and died there. Neither of them believed it anymore. Maybe not even her. Ethan said, "When did it stop being kind?" Maya looked toward the window instead of at him. "I don't know." He waited. She gave a short, irritated breath. "That's not me dodging you. I really don't know. It wasn't one moment." "Then give me a few." She pressed her lips together, then nodded once, like she was agreeing to testimony no one had yet asked for in full. "He started dropping by more when you were on long sight days," she said. "He'd bring things. For Noah, mostly. Or food. Or he'd say he was in the neighborhood and wanted to make sure I had the contractor number for the faucet because you'd mentioned it was leaking." Ethan pictured the faucet. The stupid leak under the kitchen sink last spring. Maya texting him photos while he was at the interchange job. Grant somehow knowing about that. "He came in?" "Sometimes." "How many times?" "I don't know." "Maya." She looked at him then, irritated and ashamed all at once. "I don't know, Ethan. More than once. Less than 20. I don't know." He let that sit. The fact of Grant inside the house before the night Ethan came home early rearranged something deep and quiet in him. "Did you tell me when he came by?" "Not always." "Why?" She looked down at the rug. "Because sometimes it would have sounded stupid." He gave a small nod. "And sometimes," she swallowed, "sometimes because I knew you'd hear something in it." He laughed then, and the sound made her recoil a fraction. "So I was right." "That's not what I—" "Keep going." She did. Maybe because he'd said it in the same voice he used when Noah was heading for a meltdown, an argument became useless. Maybe because she had run out of places to move backward to. He'd text at odd times, she said. Not all the time. Enough to stay there. Ask if Noah was asleep yet. Ask if you were still out. Ask if I ever got a break. And you answered, not always. But enough. Maya's eyes flashed. Yes, enough. That honesty almost made it worse. Ethan crossed his arms. Then what? Then nothing for a while. He said nothing. She took the silence as accusation anyway. I'm serious. It wasn't like... She stopped, searching for a language that wouldn't damn her too fast. It wasn't physical right away. The phrase slid under Ethan's ribs. Not right away. Was there a first time you told him to stop? Yes. When? After he made it obvious? What does that mean? Maya's face colored. It means he stopped pretending he was checking on you. And I told him not to text me like that. Like what? She shook her head. And you know what? No, I want to hear you say it. For a second, he thought she wouldn't. Then she said, looking past him, like he was interested in me. The room felt smaller. And then what happened? He backed off. Ethan waited. For a while, she said, already hearing the shape of the next question. How long? I don't remember exactly. He took one step toward her. Not enough to crowd. Enough to make her stop leaning on the dresser and stand straight. Maya, I'm asking because I need to know what my life was. Something in her face moved at that. Not enough to save her. Enough to show she understood the size of what he was really asking for. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands knotted together so tightly her knuckles blanched. He backed off. Then Noah had that stretch in the spring where everything was bad all at once. Ethan's brow tightened. What stretch? The sleep regression, the school calls, the insurance denial for OT. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Pick one. He remembered it. Of course he did. Weeks of Noah waking at 2 and then 4, overstimulated at school, biting the collar of his shirts until they stretched out, refusing foods he'd eaten for months. Maya moving through the house like someone always half an inch from tears. Ethan picking up extra hours anyway, because the promotion had just come through and more money meant maybe some room. Finally, maybe they could breathe a little. Maya said, that's when Grant started again. With what? Checking in, asking if there was anything he could do, saying he knew you were under pressure. Ethan looked at her for a long time. Was that when you started wanting him, he asked. She inhaled sharply, no, but the answer came too fast. He heard it, so did she. Maya rubbed a hand over her face. That's not what this was. What was it then? She looked at him helplessly, then angrily, then not helpless at all. You were gone all the time, she said, and the instant it was out, she hated it. Ethan's expression didn't change. That somehow made it worse. I'm not blaming you, she said quickly. You are. No, I'm saying what my days were like. Then say that. Maya stood again. Fine. My days were Noah's appointments and school emails and trying to sell enough online to cover groceries and cleaning up the same messes and making sure he didn't get thrown sideways by the wrong sock seam or the wrong cereal bowl or a fire drill at school nobody warned us about. You came home exhausted. I knew why. I did. But you were gone and tired and gone and tired, and everything in this house was either a problem to solve or a thing to schedule. She stopped because she had finally heard herself. Ethan's face had gone very still. Maya's voice dropped. I'm not saying that made it okay. He looked away toward the closet door. No. She took one shaky breath. I'm saying he knew how to talk to me when I was already worn down. There it was again. That half confession she kept circling. Ethan said, you liked it. She looked up sharply and I hated myself for it. That's not the same answer. Her mouth opened shut, opened again. When she spoke, it was lower, less defended. Maybe because there was no point left in defense that looked clean. No, she said, it's not. He waited. She stared at the floor between them. There were times I liked not feeling invisible. The word sat there. Invisible. Not affair, not sex, not love, not trapped. Invisible. Ethan felt that one go through him differently than the rest. Dirtier, more human, less forgivable. After how long, he asked. Maya shook her head once, exhausted. I don't know how to answer that in a way that doesn't make you look at me like this. He almost said there isn't one. Instead, he said, try. She gave a short laugh with no life in it. You want a timeline? Yes. All right. She wiped her palms on her jeans. After that first dinner when he came by the house, he started texting. After the promotion, it got worse. More messages, then lunches when he said he was nearby. Then one time he kissed me in the car, and I told him not to ever do it again. Ethan's jaw tightened. And I meant it. He looked at her and she flinched. I did, she said. I meant it then. Then Maya's eyes filled, but she kept going. He backed off again. Then Noah got sent home from school that week in September because he wouldn't come out from under the reading table, and they said he was too dysregulated to stay. You were up at Prescott on that concrete pour. I was alone. He called. He offered to help with a private aid recommendation somebody in his neighborhood had used. He brought takeout. He stayed too long. Ethan could see pieces of the week she was talking about. The missed calls on his phone while he was in a hard hat and orange vest, trying to keep a pour on schedule. Maya texting, call when you can. Noah screaming in the background in one voicemail, so faint Ethan had turned the volume all the way up to make sure it was him. Maya said, I should have cut him off completely then. But you didn't. No, why? She closed her eyes. He waited. When she answered, the words were small and terrible. Because by then I knew he mattered to your work. The room emptied out around that sentence. Ethan heard the hum of the bedside lamp, the faint hiss of the air through the vent. A motorcycle somewhere outside on the road. Nothing else? Maya must have seen something in his face because she rushed at once into the gap. Not like that. I'm not saying I sat there and thought I'd trade myself for your promotion. That's not... How else am I supposed to hear it? I'm saying I knew he could help you, that he already had, that he listened when you talked, that he... Ethan cut her off, and so you didn't stop. Her breath caught. I tried to, she said. When? There were times. How many? I don't know. He laughed once, ugly again. You remember enough when it helps you. She took a step toward him. That's not fair. He looked at her. Something in her gave way then. Not into innocence, not into collapse, into something closer to plainness than she had been willing to offer before. No, she said, it's not fair. He said nothing. She nodded as if conceding to a charge she had finally stopped trying to reword. There was a point where I knew if I cut him off completely, it might hurt you. The sentence made the earlier one worse because it was clearer. And you decided... I decided nothing, she said sharply. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It wasn't one decision. It was 100 moments where I didn't stop something hard enough. The truth of that made Ethan want to put his fist through the wall, because it was uglier than a bargain. Bargains had edges, rules. This was slower, softer, more degrading. The kind of rot that spread through a life while everybody still called it living. Maya's voice thinned. I kept thinking I'd shut it down. I kept thinking not yet, not this week, not with Noah spiraling, not while you were finally getting somewhere. He stared at her. Finally getting somewhere. The phrase took him back to the office, to Grant talking about potential, to the first time Ethan had seen a real path up instead of sideways, to the pride in Maya's face when he brought home the raise letter, to Noah eating chicken nuggets in his booster seat while Ethan said maybe they could start putting something away now. Maybe they could breathe. All of it touched now, all of it stained. Maya was crying openly by then, but it didn't soften anything. I know what it sounds like. No, Ethan said, I don't think you do. She drew in breath to answer and then stopped. Maybe because there was no answer left that would not simply be another arrangement of the same filth. They stood in the room without speaking. At last Maya said, almost whispering, I didn't love him. Ethan looked at her for a long time. That had mattered once. Maybe yesterday, maybe 3 hours ago. In the space they were in now, it felt almost childish. He said, that's not what's killing me. The words landed before he could stop them. Maya's face changed. Not because he had finally said something cruel, because he had finally said something true enough to leave a mark. She sank slowly back onto the bed, all fight gone out of her posture. I know. He believed she knew that much. That was part of the horror. The silence stretched. Ethan looked at the room differently now. The lamp on Maya's side, the folded laundry basket near the closet, the framed print over the bed they had bought at Target because it matched nothing and cost almost nothing. And Maya said blank walls made rentals feel temporary. Their room, his room, the room where the categories had broken so quietly it had taken a flight home and a pair of shoes by the door to hear it. Maya said, what are you gonna do? He almost answered, I don't know. It would have been true, but the truth was changing under him even as she asked. He picked up his keys from the dresser. Maya stood at once. Ethan! He moved past her. Ethan, wait. He stopped at the bedroom door but didn't turn around. Behind him, her voice shook. Please don't leave like this. Like this. There was no version left to leave any other way. He opened the door and walked down the hall. The living room was dim. The kitchen light still burned over the sink. Noah's bedroom door was cracked open, nightlight casting a soft blue strip onto the carpet. Maya followed him as far as the living room. Where are you going? He didn't answer. She came a little farther. You can't drive like this. That almost made him laugh. Like this, not drunk, not wild-eyed, just done enough to move. He took his wallet from the counter, grabbed the thin blanket folded over the couch arm, and headed for the front door. Ethan. He finally looked at her. She stopped talking. He opened the door, stepped into the warm night, and shut it behind him before she could say anything else that sounded like a plea and a strategy at the same time. The driveway still held the day's heat. He got into the truck without turning on the cab light and sat there in the dark, both hands on the wheel. Inside the house, one lamp stayed on. He could see its glow through the front window, a warm square of light over a home that from the street still looked inhabited by ordinary people with ordinary problems. After a while, he leaned the seat back, unfolded the blanket over himself, and listened to the engine tick down from the heat it had held all day. He did not sleep right away. Every time he shut his eyes, the year rearranged itself again. Grant in the kitchen, Grant by the sink, Grant in the car outside school, maybe not. Maya checking a text and turning the phone face down, the promotion letter, the raise, Noah's toy truck on the shelf, Maya saying she felt invisible. Maya saying she knew it could help him. Maya saying she didn't stop it hard enough, not clean enough to hate one way, not simple enough to survive. He turned onto his side and faced the windshield. The house sat in front of him, lit from within, sealed up, familiar in outline, and ruined in content. Sometime after midnight, the living room lamp finally went dark. Ethan stayed where he was, proof of nothing clean. The next morning, Ethan woke in the truck with his neck stiff, one boot half off, and the sun already pressing heat through the windshield. For a second, he didn't know where he was. Then the house came back into shape beyond the glass. Quiet, beige, ordinary, with the front curtains still drawn and the small ceramic planter Maya had bought at Target cracked down one side from the summer heat. He lay there staring at the ceiling of the cab until the ache in his shoulder and the smell of old coffee and vinyl reminded him this was not some temporary bad night. He had slept in his own driveway because he couldn't bear the room at the end of the hall. The front door opened. Maya stepped out in leggings and Noah's school t-shirt, the one he sometimes wore when she was trying to make mornings easier by keeping familiar textures close. Her hair was pulled back. She had Noah's backpack over one shoulder and his lunchbox in one hand. Noah came behind her, dragging one foot a little, not from tiredness, but from the careful self-containment he slipped into when the world felt off. He stopped on the walkway when he saw the truck. Ethan pushed the door open and got out. Noah looked at him, then at the house, then back again. You slept out here? Maya said too quickly, and Dad fell asleep late. Ethan shut the truck door. Yeah. Noah frowned. Why? The morning air was already dry. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler clicked against a patch of dirt, pretending to be a lawn. Ethan looked at his son and knew there was no useful version of the truth available to 6-year-old ears. Couldn't sleep, he said. Noah seemed to test that for weak spots. Then he asked, Are you driving me? Maya and Ethan spoke at once. No, I got him. They both stopped. Noah's gaze moved between them. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. Ethan knew that look. Noah was taking inventory. Tone, sequence, who stood where, who answered too fast. Maya softened her voice. I'm already ready, buddy. Noah didn't answer. He turned to Ethan instead. You coming back in? Later. That wasn't enough for Noah, but it was what Ethan had. Maya shifted the lunchbox from one hand to the other. We're going to be late. The strain under her words was thin enough to miss if you didn't know her. Ethan did know her, or knew the old map and kept finding roads missing. He crouched and fixed the collar of Noah's shirt where it had folded in on itself. Noah leaned into the touch for half a second, then straightened again. Have a good day, Ethan said. Noah nodded once, solemn. Speech today. I know. And library. Okay. Noah seemed satisfied by the fact of being known. He walked to the car without another question, but he got in more slowly than usual, turning once before shutting the door to make sure Ethan was still there. Maya stayed by the driver's side with her hand on the roof. You can't keep doing this in front of him, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, truck-tired, unshaven, still in yesterday's jeans. Doing what? She let out one breath through her nose. You know what? No, say it. Maya glanced toward Noah in the back seat, then lowered her voice further. Sleeping outside, not coming in, looking at me like I'm... She stopped. Like you're what? Maya's mouth tightened. You know what I am. That should have satisfied something in him. It didn't. She said, please don't do anything reckless today. The choice of words sat between them. Reckless, Ethan repeated. Yes. He looked past her into the car where Noah had already put on one headphone cup, but not the other. A compromise he made when he wanted sound but not too much sound. You mean without asking permission first? Maya flinched. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? But she had no answer that didn't lead somewhere. She didn't want to go. And Noah was watching through the half-dark glass now, eyes narrowed, feeling the pressure if not the content. Maya got into the car and drove away. Ethan stood in the driveway until the brake lights disappeared at the corner. Then he went inside. The house smelled faintly of toast and kid shampoo and the detergent Maya used too much of because Noah liked clothes better when they smelled strongly clean. Ethan locked the door behind him, though he wasn't sure what he thought he was keeping out now. He stood in the kitchen and looked at the counter. Maya's phone wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. She had it with her. He glanced toward the bedroom and then back to the sink. The silence inside the house wasn't relief. It was room. He poured himself coffee from what remained in the pot. It had gone bitter. He drank half of it anyway, standing in the middle of the kitchen, and then texted Maya. Need your phone when you get back, and passwords, all of them. He stared at the message before sending it. The act felt uglier than he'd expected. Not because he thought he had no right, because rights had stopped helping. She wrote back almost immediately. Okay, no argument, no delay, no why, just that. He put the mug in the sink. By noon, he had walked through every room in the house without doing anything useful. He opened drawers and closed them again. He stood in Noah's room too long looking at the stack of visual cards on the dresser and the weighted blanket folded at the foot of the bed. He sat once at the kitchen table with a legal pad, wrote options at the top, and then stared at the blank beneath it until the word itself started to look stupid. When Maya came back from pickup, she didn't bring Noah inside right away. Ethan heard the car, then the long pause outside while Noah protested something in the driveway. Shoes, maybe. Backpack. Wrong order of entry. A minute later, the door opened and Noah came in angry and overbright, already teetering. I don't want crackers, he said to no one in particular. I want the other ones. Maya held up a hand. Then get the other ones. You said crackers? I said snack, not crackers. Noah dropped his backpack too hard by the wall. Ethan crossed the room and picked it up before the sound had fully died. Noah let him. Maya's face was set the way it got when she was holding 6 things at once inside her head, and all of them were fragile. She took her phone from her bag, unlocked it, and set it on the table between herself and Ethan. Then, after half a second, she added a folded sheet of paper with passwords written in her narrow, angled handwriting. There. Noah was in the pantry by then, breathing too loudly, moving boxes, making the cardboard scrape against the shelf. Ethan looked at the phone, then at Maya. What about email? It's on the paper. Old account too? Yes. She didn't defend herself. That almost made it worse. Noah came out with the wrong crackers and immediately hated that he'd chosen them. I said not these. Maya closed her eyes once. Then put them back and get the other ones. He didn't move. Ethan crouched. I'll help. Noah handed him the box without looking at him. Ethan swapped it out, found the right snack, peeled back the tab exactly halfway, because that was how Noah liked to do the rest himself. Noah took it and walked to the couch without thanks, already receding into the narrow world of managing his own internal weather. The ordinary rhythm of that exchange made the phone on the table feel radioactive. Maya said quietly, You can do it now or later. He looked at her. I'm not hiding anything, she said. He almost laughed. Instead, he took the phone and the password sheet and went into the bedroom, shutting the door without slamming it. The room held the stale intimacy of people still sleeping in the same house while no longer inside the same life. He sat on the edge of the bed with the phone in one hand and the paper in the other. At first, there was nothing. Recent texts had been deleted cleanly enough to look normal if he hadn't been looking for the gaps. Email inboxes were work receipts, school notices, a receipt from Target, 2 spam offers for patio furniture. He dug farther back. Archived threads, deleted folders, searched terms. Grant. Holloway. G. Nothing cleanly labeled? Of course not. Then he searched Noah's name. That cracked it. Messages surfaced not because they were romantic, not because they were explicit, but because Grant had buried himself in concern. How'd Noah do today? You get the referral I sent? He looked tired at the picnic. You doing okay? Tell Ethan not to worry about tomorrow. I've got his back here. And threaded through those, lower and later and more careful. You don't have to answer if it's a bad night. I keep thinking about you in that yellow sweater. You deserve someone looking out for you too. You can tell me to back off and I will. Ethan stared at that last line long enough to understand its real function. Not permission. Pressure disguised as permission. A man leaving a door open with his foot already in it. He kept going. There were longer stretches where nothing survived but Maya's half of an exchange, as if she had deleted selectively. Maybe him too, maybe both of them. Maybe over months. Stop texting this late. You can't come by when he's not here. I said no. Please don't make this harder. Then later, you didn't have to send that. He appreciated what you said to him. I can't talk right now. And later still, not tonight. Noah's home. You can't keep acting like this is simple. Not proof of one clean thing. No single message ugly enough to print and wave in a room and watch it burn. But a pattern, a persistence, access, pressure, rewards. And mixed inside it, worse because humaner, were the places Maya had not cut it off hard enough. Thank you for the aid number. He's sleeping finally. I'm sorry about before. You don't need to worry about me. That's not fair. I know what you're doing. He sat very still. Then he took screenshots. First one, then another, then 6 more. The useful ones weren't the dirtiest. They were the ones that showed rhythm. Concern, favor, suggestion, pressure. The way a man built a case for being indispensable before asking to be wanted. When he was done, he sent them to an email account Maya didn't know he still used. An old Gmail he'd made years ago for job boards and never deleted. Then he cleared the sent history on the phone. His own secrecy startled him less than it should have. When he came back out, Maya looked up from where she sat at the kitchen table helping Noah sort picture cards for tomorrow's schedule. Her face gave away nothing except waiting. Find what you need, she asked. No, the answer was true enough to pass. Noah lined up school, lunch, speech, home, tablet time. Then he stopped and picked up the speech card again. Not speech, he said. Maya's voice was tired but gentle. Yes, speech. No speech. You already went today. Noah held the card tighter. Then why is it there? It's for tomorrow. He looked at the card, then at his mother, already slipping sideways. Ethan said, "Oh, tomorrow card goes on the other side, remember?" Noah froze, recalibrating. Maya shut her eyes briefly again. Right, sorry. She moved the card. Noah's breathing slowed. That one tiny mistake shouldn't have mattered. It did. Later, after Noah was in his room with a train video and headphones half on, Ethan went out to the truck and called Grant from his personal phone. Grant answered on the second ring. Ethan. No office, Ethan said. Meet me. A pause, not long. Long enough to register the change. Where? Ethan named a coffee place off the frontage road near one of Noah's therapy centers. Public enough. Impersonal enough. A place where truck guys grabbed cold brew and moms waited with tablets open and no one listened, unless voices got too loud. Grant said, now? Yes. Another pause, then, all right. The cafe was nearly empty at 4:30 between rushes. A college kid in an apron wiped down a pastry case. A woman in scrubs sat near the window doing something on her laptop. The air smelled like espresso and overripe bananas from the display by the register. Ethan took a table outside instead, under a faded umbrella that did little against the heat bouncing off the pavement. He wanted Grant in the light. Grant arrived in a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled once and sunglasses he removed before he sat down. He looked exactly like the kind of man who could walk into any public place in America and be read as steady, successful, harmless. He didn't order anything. You shouldn't have called me here, he said. Ethan almost smiled. You came. Grant looked at him for a beat. What do you want? Ethan took out his phone and opened one screenshot, then another. He didn't slide the device across the table. He just let Grant see enough. Grant's eyes moved once, then returned to Ethan's face. If he was rattled, it showed only in the extra second before he spoke. That's selective. Yeah, you know it is. Ethan said nothing. Grant leaned back in the metal chair. You bring fragments like this to anyone, it becomes a mess fast. Half context, deleted context, her word against mine, yours against both, mine against both. Grant's mouth thinned. There it was, just enough. Ethan let him look at one more screenshot. One where Grant had written, you deserve someone looking out for you too. Grant said, you think those help you? I think they help me understand what I'm looking at. Grant folded his hands on the table. What you're looking at is private communication between two adults who made bad decisions. Two adults. Bad decisions. The professional flattening of it almost impressed Ethan now. How efficiently Grant stripped out pressure, hierarchy, access, years. You mean my wife and my boss, Ethan said. Grant didn't answer that directly. I mean, if you're imagining some clean story where I'm a cartoon villain and she had no agency, you're not going to find it in those messages. Ethan felt the line hit because it was built to, not just defense, corrosion. He said, you kept using Noah. Grant's expression sharpened. That's not fair. Ethan laughed once. No? You want to accuse me of crossing lines? Go ahead. But don't rewrite concern as manipulation because it fits better. That almost made Ethan lean across the table, and instead he said, you don't get concern. Ethan. No, you don't get that word. The woman inside the cafe glanced up and then back at her screen. Grant lowered his voice. I'm trying very hard not to make this worse. Something in Ethan settled then. Not peace, not clarity. Just a grim, working understanding that Grant still thought the center of the struggle was narrative control. Not what he had done. What version of it survived contact with other people? That helped. It didn't heal anything. It helped. Ethan said, "You're scared." Grant actually blinked. Barely, but enough. Then the smoothness returned. Of what? You tell me. Grant gave a soft exhale. I'm scared for how ugly this gets if you decide ugly is all you have left. The sentence was almost good. Grant probably knew it. Ethan hated him for that too. He stood. Grant looked up. Sit down. No. Then listen carefully. Grant's voice stayed low, but there was something harder in it now, a faint metallic edge finally showing through. You are not holding anything clean. Not legally, not professionally, not personally. If you blow this open without thinking it through, you don't control where it lands. Maybe that was meant to be a warning, maybe advice. With Grant, it was always both at once. Ethan put his phone back in his pocket. For the first time, he said, "You look nervous." Grant's face closed all the way then. Ethan left before he could win that moment back. Driving home, he felt it. Small, mean, undeniable. The sense that he had finally pushed Grant half a step backward. Not enough to win, not enough to free himself. Enough to prove the man could be made to absorb impact. It carried him all the way to the curb in front of the house. Then he walked inside and found Noah on the floor by the couch, screaming because Maya had changed the order of dinner and bath. It was already in progress when Ethan came through the door. Noah was red-faced, crying hard, one sock off, one still on, heels kicking against the rug in frantic bursts. Maya knelt a few feet away, not touching him, using the voice she used when touch would only make it worse. Okay, I know. Noah shouted, "No bath first, no bath first." Maya looked up at Ethan with fury and exhaustion mixed together. Please don't come in loud. He hadn't said anything. He dropped his keys on the side table more softly than he wanted to and crouched by the wall, giving Noah space. The room smelled like mac and cheese and stress sweat and the lavender lotion Maya sometimes used on Noah's arms at night. "Hey," Ethan said. Noah's eyes flicked to him but didn't land. He was too far gone for full language now. Maya said without looking at Ethan, "He thought you were picking him up from therapy." Ethan stared at her. "What?" "I had to switch it. I told you this morning I was taking him." "That's not the same as saying I wasn't doing pickup." She let out a sharp breath. "I was trying to get through the day." Noah cried harder, covering both ears now. Ethan reached for the laminated visual schedule on the coffee table, found the bath card, pulled it off, then set dinner back in front. "Dinner first," he said, "then bath." Noah's crying hitched, not stopping but changing shape. Maya said, "That's not the issue." "No," Ethan said, "and right now it is." He kept his voice low, gave Noah the dinner card, waited while Noah gripped it with both hands like it anchored him physically. After another minute, the crying broke down into sobs, then hiccups, then the long, exhausted, shuddering breaths that came after. Maya sat back on her heels, one hand over her own mouth. Ethan carried Noah to the couch when Noah finally let him, sat with the child draped across him, all wiry heat and spent grief. Noah's face was blotchy. He clung once at Ethan's shirt and then went limp with the enormous trust of exhausted children. Dinner happened late and poorly. Noah ate 2 bites and half a yogurt pouch. Bath happened in silence. Bed took longer than usual. By the time Noah finally cried himself empty and fell asleep, one hand still fisted in the edge of his blanket, Ethan felt scraped hollow. He stayed on the edge of the bed a moment after Maya left the room. The small nightlight threw a blue wash over Noah's face. On the dresser stood the line of toy vehicles Noah rotated by mood: fire truck, train, yellow excavator, ambulance. The excavator was still one of the ones Grant had brought over. Ethan looked away from it and saw his phone lit in his hand. The screenshots were still there in the hidden folder he had made for them. Proof if you were generous, smoke if you weren't, enough to stain, not enough to cleanse. He heard Maya in the hallway, not coming in yet, waiting. When he finally stepped out and closed Noah's door behind him, she was standing under the weak hall light with both arms folded tight across herself. "You made this worse," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. She went on before he could answer. "You met with him, didn't you?" That stopped him. Her face changed. "You did?" "Yeah," without telling me. He stared at her in the dim hall, at the accusation in her voice, and felt something go cold. "I don't remember you asking permission when it mattered." She flinched. Then anger took over fast enough to cover it. "This isn't about permission. This is about having any plan at all before you start swinging." "There it is," he said. "What? You still think the problem is how I handle him?" Maya's voice went thin. The problem is Noah is starting to feel all of this, and you're acting like what? Like hurting Grant fixes anything? The line landed because it came too close to something Ethan had not let himself say out loud. He stared at her. Maya saw it and instantly regretted speaking, but not enough to take it back. You think I don't know what he is? I do. But if you blow this up with no plan, we're the ones standing in the rubble, not him. For the first time all day, Ethan understood that she might mean Noah and me when she said it more than she meant you and I. He said, "You're scared for Noah." Yes, he waited. She didn't add the rest. He nodded once, and that's what I thought. Maya's face hardened. Don't do that. Do what? Make me the enemy because I'm the one standing here. He almost said you already took care of that. Instead, he stepped past her and went back into Noah's room. He sat at the foot of the bed with the phone in his hand. Noah slept on his side, cheeks still damp, breathing in uneven little pulls that hadn't yet settled fully into sleep. On the screen, the screenshots glowed pale and ugly in the dark. Fragments of concern, pressure, invitation, access. Not enough to cleanly destroy a man. Enough to prove rot. Ethan scrolled through them once more, then stopped. At the doorway, Maya did not come in. He could feel the split of the house around him, now more clearly than any argument had made it clear. Not husband against wife. Not even victim against guilty party. Something worse. Two adults no longer meaning the same thing when they said protect him. Noah shifted in his sleep and made a small sound. Ethan locked the screen and sat there in the dim blue room with the phone heavy in his hand, looking at the hidden evidence like it was a bag of damp matches. Proof there had been fire maybe, but not yet enough to decide whether to light anything else. Company family. The text came in at 9:12 that morning while Ethan was standing in the kitchen rinsing out Noah's cereal bowl. Need you at the recognition dinner tonight. 6:30, you're on the program for the North Loop project. No greeting, no softening. Just the fact of it dropped into his phone like another assignment. He stood there with water running over his knuckles and read it twice. Maya was at the table, cutting the crust off a sandwich Noah hadn't asked her to cut. Noah sat beside her in headphones, lining grape halves by size instead of eating them. The room smelled like dish soap and white bread, and the lemon cleaner Maya used too heavily when she needed the house to feel under control. Ethan dried his hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle and set the bowl in the rack. Maya looked up first, reading his face before she asked, "What?" He turned the phone and laid its screen up on the table. She read the message without touching it. For a second, she said nothing. Noah picked up one grape, frowned at it, and moved it to the far end of the line. Maya asked quietly, "Are you going?" Ethan pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. "I haven't decided." She kept looking at the phone. "If you don't go, he'll know." "He already knows." "That's not what I mean." He watched her fold the sandwich into a napkin as if she could still salvage its shape. "Then say what you mean." Maya glanced toward Noah and lowered her voice. "If you don't show up to something where you're expected after everything else..." She stopped. "It becomes a message." Ethan let that sit between them. Across the table, Noah touched the crustless edge of the sandwich, then the cut side, then pushed the plate half an inch away. Maya moved it back without looking. "What if I want it to be a message?" Ethan said. Maya's hand stilled on the plate. Noah said without looking up, "No crust." "There's no crust," Maya said immediately. "No crust?" "I know, baby." Ethan sat back in the chair. The text stayed there on the screen, bright and blunt. The recognition dinner, the North Loop project, you're on the program. Grant hadn't asked, he had arranged. Not because Ethan mattered to the event. Because Ethan's presence mattered to the story. Maya picked up the phone and turned it face down. "You shouldn't let him decide this either way," she said. He almost smiled at that. "He already did." "No," she lifted her eyes to his then. "He decides if you stay home because he told you to come. He decides if you go just because you're afraid not to. That's still him." There was enough truth in it to be annoying. Ethan looked past her into the living room, where Noah's backpack sat by the couch, unzipped, therapy cards still clipped to the front pocket. The house felt small around all of them lately, like every room now belonged to the last sentence said inside it. Maya said, "If you go, go because you want to see something, not because he wants you there." That landed differently, less defensive, less like advice she was giving to protect him, more like something she had figured out too late about herself. Noah shoved the plate away again. "I don't want this." Maya's attention snapped back to him. "Okay, yogurt." "No." "Toast?" "No." "What do you want?" Noah pressed his palms over the sides of his headphones. "Not that." The air in the room tightened. Ethan stood before the moment could tip harder. "I'll make eggs." Noah looked at him from under his hair. "Not runny." "Yeah." He moved to the stove and took out the pan. The domestic motions came back to him easily, which felt like a different kind of humiliation now. How much of a man's life could still run on muscle memory while the rest of him was coming apart? Behind him, Maya said quietly, "If you go, I'm not going with you." He cracked the first egg too hard and got shell into the pan. He fished it out with 2 fingers. "I wasn't going to ask." "I know." That stung more than if she'd said no first. By 5:45, he was dressed in one of the 2 decent button-down shirts he still owned from before the promotion, when he'd had to start appearing in rooms with vice presidents and clients instead of just site supers and crews. The shirt sat wrong on him now, too stiff through the shoulders, too aware of itself. He stood in the bedroom with one cuff undone and looked at his reflection without seeing a person in it. Maya was in the doorway. She'd changed Noah into pajamas early because he'd been brittle all afternoon and sometimes the ritual helped. Her own hair was down, still damp at the ends from a shower she had probably taken just to reset her face. She wore a plain black, long-sleeve top and jeans, nothing that looked like she had dressed for anything except staying home. "You don't have to do this," she said. He fastened the cuff. "You said this morning I should go if I wanted to see something." "I said don't let him decide." "That's what this is." Maya watched him button the sleeve. "And if you see what you already know is there?" Ethan reached for his keys on the dresser. "Then at least I saw it." She nodded once, but it wasn't agreement. More like recognition that he had already left in some part of himself and the rest of him was only catching up. As he moved past her, she said, "If Noah asks, what do you want me to say?" He stopped. The question should have been simple. Dinner, work event, late night. But lately, every practical question arrived, dragging its shadow behind it. "Tell him it's work," Ethan said. Maya looked at him for a second longer than the answer required. "Okay." He drove to Scottsdale as the sun dropped behind him, turning the west-facing glass on office buildings into strips of copper fire. Traffic thickened near the resort corridor. SUVs, ride shares, golfers' cars. The conference center where the company was holding the event sat behind manicured hedges and pale stone walls with uplighting already on. Valets in black polos moved at the entrance like well-trained shadows. Ethan parked in self-parking 2 rows out and sat with the engine off. From where he was, he could see the ballroom windows lit gold from inside. People moved behind the glass carrying drinks, their shapes softened by reflection. It could have been a wedding reception, a charity gala, any American room full of people who believed in dressed-up versions of this. He got out and walked in. Inside, the air was cool enough to make the skin on his forearms tighten. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish, carpet, and expensive catering food kept warm somewhere out of sight. Registration tables lined one wall, with neat white cards in acrylic stands. His name was already printed. Of course it was. A young woman in event black smiled at him automatically. "Welcome!" He took his badge and clipped it to his jacket pocket, not because he wanted to, but because not doing it would have required explanation. The ballroom door stood open. The first thing that hit him was the sound. Not loud exactly, but thick. Laughter, glass on glass, silverware. A microphone testing once with a soft pop. The second thing was the light. Warm, flattering light that made everyone look as if they belonged to a cleaner version of their own life. Round tables draped in cream linen. Centerpieces of white flowers and greenery. A stage at one end with 2 screens showing the company logo and a slideshow of project photos. On another screen, candid shots from site visits and retreats rotated slowly. Crews in hard hats, drone shots of overpasses, volunteer days, family picnics. Family picnics. Ethan stood just inside the room and felt the humiliation arrive not as a single blow, but as a climate. "Ethan," he turned. Cameron, from estimating, pink-cheeked already from his first drink, came over with his wife at his elbow. "There you are, man. Thought maybe you were bailing." Cameron's wife smiled the polite spouse smile of someone who had met Ethan twice and remembered only enough to be decent. "Hi." "Hey," Ethan said. Cameron clapped him once on the upper arm. "Big night. They're making a whole thing out of North Loop." Ethan said nothing. Cameron either didn't notice or chose not to. "Where's Maya?" "She stayed home with Noah." "Ah." Cameron nodded like that made perfect sense. "How's he doing?" Ethan felt the question hit the same bruise every version of it hit now. "He's okay." Good. Cameron shifted his drink from one hand to the other. "Grant was asking if you made it in." "Of course he was." Ethan looked over Cameron's shoulder toward the far end of the room. Grant stood near the stage in a dark suit, one hand around a glass of sparkling water, smiling at something the regional VP was saying. Even at a distance, he looked complete, composed, a man held together by his own belief in his right to occupy every room he entered. As if sensing the gaze, Grant looked up. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Grant didn't freeze, didn't look surprised. He gave the smallest possible nod, almost invisible to anyone not waiting for it. Acknowledgement, accounting, confirmation that Ethan had come. Ethan looked away first, not because he had to, but because he couldn't bear the possibility that anyone around them might read meaning into a 3-second stare. He took a club soda from a passing tray because having empty hands felt worse. The room filled around him with small talk and corporate weather. A superintendent talking about travel schedules. Someone's husband describing a new pool build in Paradise Valley. A woman from compliance in a navy sheath dress laughing softly at a joke about permitting delays. Nobody was fake, exactly. That made it harder. They were all real enough in their own narrow frame. That was the problem with public life. Most of its cruelty came from people behaving normally. He moved through the room, nodding when spoken to, answering in short lines, each one costing him something invisible and ridiculous. Yes, Noah's in first grade now. No, Maya couldn't make it. Yes, Flagstaff wrapped on time. Yes, the weather up there had cooled off. No, he hadn't tried the short rib yet. At one of the photo screens, the slideshow shifted. There he was in a hard hat at the North Loop site, one hand on a plan set, listening to Grant point at something off-frame. The caption underneath read, "Leadership in Motion." Ethan looked away so fast it made the room tilt. A bell chimed softly somewhere near the stage. Staff began guiding people to their tables. His name card placed him at a table near the front with middle management and 2 spouses he vaguely recognized from prior events. Grant was at the head table with executives and clients. Not close enough to speak privately. Close enough to preside. Dinner began in courses that tasted like nothing Ethan could identify afterward. Salad, chicken, potatoes stacked as if architecture made food more elegant. He chewed because everyone else was chewing. The speeches started once dessert plates had been cleared. The VP for operations spoke first, then someone from safety, then Grant. He stepped to the podium like he had been born moving toward microphones. No jacket now. Sleeve cuffs neat. Voice warm enough to read as humble, controlled enough to read as strong. He thanked teams, mentioned long hours, mentioned resilience, mentioned the way this company had always believed people came first. Ethan sat with both hands flat under the table. Grant said, "Projects don't happen because of one person. They happen because people choose loyalty. They show up for one another. They step up not just as employees, but as human beings." A few heads nodded around the room. Ethan stared at the water glass in front of him until the room blurred at the edges. Grant moved into the North Loop remarks. Timeline, challenges, delays overcome, partnerships maintained. Then, with perfect inevitability, he said Ethan's name. "Some of you know Ethan Carter from our field side. He came up the hard way, earned every inch of responsibility, and he's become exactly the kind of manager this company tries to grow. Steady, accountable, and committed to the work even when the work isn't easy." Applause started around the room. Ethan heard it as sound before he understood it as directed at him. People at his table turned smiling. Cameron, 2 tables over, lifted his hand in a little salute. One of the spouses beside Ethan leaned in and said, "That's wonderful." Wonderful. Ethan stood because not standing would have been a scene before he had chosen one. He stood and nodded once, and sat back down while the applause went on 2 beats too long. His skin felt cold under the ballroom heat. On stage, Grant went on speaking as if nothing had happened, as if Ethan were an example and not a wound he had helped engineer. By the time dessert coffee was being poured, Ethan was no longer hearing entire sentences. Only fragments. Family values. Investment in people. Stability. Culture. Trust. Then someone at his table, one of the project engineers, a woman he'd shared exactly 3 job trailers with over 2 years, said, "Didn't your little boy come to that lake retreat last summer?" Ethan looked at her. She smiled, trying to be kind. "He was adorable. He had those big headphones on all day." Across the table, another man laughed softly. "Yeah, I remember that." Grant spent half the afternoon helping him with those toy boats by the dock. There it was. Not accusation, not exposure, just memory, offered warmly, socially, as another bead on the string of what a generous leader looked like. Ethan's hand tightened around his fork. The project engineer kept going, oblivious. "He really lights up around people when he feels safe, huh?" Ethan looked past her toward the head table. Grant was listening to someone beside him, head bent, one hand at the base of his water glass. The perfect picture of a senior leader still engaged after a long event. All at once, Ethan saw it with a clarity so hard it seemed almost external to him. The whole year had been curated. Not staged from scratch, real things had happened. Noah really had smiled at the dock. Maya really had laughed once. Ethan really had felt grateful, but curated, framed, guided toward meaning. Grant had not needed to invent goodness. He had only needed to stand inside the moments long enough to own their interpretation. The room felt airless. The woman beside him was still smiling, waiting for him to answer about Noah. He remembers people, Ethan said. It was true enough to pass. Then he set his fork down, unfolded his napkin, and laid it on the table with more care than the gesture deserved. "Excuse me," he said. No one stopped him. That was what made public withdrawal so sharp. You had to choose it while the room kept being polite. He walked out, not fast enough to look wild, not slow enough to look calm, through the ballroom doors, past the registration table, down the corridor lined with conference room plaques and framed desert landscapes. No one called after him. Or if they did, he didn't hear it over the blood moving at the base of his skull. Outside, the resort parking lot was cooler, but not cool. Night had taken the edge off the heat without erasing it. Palm trees stood black against the lit buildings. Beyond the porte cochere, valet whistles and muffled greetings rose and fell. Ethan stopped near the self-parking row and looked back at the ballroom windows. Through the glass, he could still see the gold light and moving silhouettes. From out here, the whole event looked beautiful, clean, successful, like a place where no one had ever had to choose between dignity and insurance coverage, like a place where no one's child had become leverage in the hands of a man who gave speeches about loyalty. He took out his phone. For a moment, he just held it. Then he opened Mail, composed a new message. The screen threw cold light across his knuckles. He typed in the first address from memory, then searched the rest. HR, compliance, employee relations. The names lined up in the address bar like a door he could not unknow once it was open. He put the cursor in the subject line. Did not type. The resort doors opened behind him, and laughter spilled briefly into the lot before the doors swung shut again. Ethan stood in the dark with the draft open and the ballroom glowing behind the glass. The whole company still inside, applauding the story that had been built around him. I was not helped. When Ethan came through the front door, the house was dark, except for the lamp over the stove and the blue nightlight leaking out of Noah's room. Maya was at the kitchen counter in bare feet, still in the same black shirt she'd worn earlier. She had one hand around a mug gone cold, and the other pressed flat to the laminate like she needed to hold herself in place. She looked up before he shut the door. She didn't ask how the event went. That was how he knew something in him had already changed enough for her to see it from across the room. Ethan set his keys down carefully. His phone was still in his hand. The draft email remained open in the background, like a lit match he'd forgotten to put out. Maya's eyes flicked to the phone, then back to his face. "You stayed longer than I thought." He looked at her for a second, then at the mug in her hand, then at the refrigerator covered with Noah's visual cards and one crooked magnet from the Grand Canyon gift shop they had gone to 3 years ago and barely enjoyed, because Noah had melted down in the visitor center gift store and Ethan had carried him out, while Maya apologized to strangers who were never going to think about them again. "I'm done letting him narrate this," Ethan said. The sentence sat between them. Maya went very still. Not shocked, not confused, just still in the way people got when the shape of what they had been hoping to delay finally stepped into the room. "What does that mean?" she asked. Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket. "It means I'm not doing this where he gets to be the calm one, and I get to be the problem." Maya set her mug down too hard. Coffee jumped over the rim and spotted the counter. She looked at the spill for a second without wiping it. "Ethan? No, I'm not telling you to let him win. It's funny," he said, voice quiet. "That word keeps coming up like this is a game somebody can score." Maya drew in a breath. "That's not what I mean." "No?" He looked toward the hallway. "Then tell me what you mean without using Noah as the first and last reason I should stay quiet." The mention of Noah changed her face at once. She lowered her voice, which told him more than the words did. "He is a reason. He is always a reason." "Yes, that's the point." Maya pushed a hand through her hair and let it fall. "You think I don't know that?" He didn't answer. In Noah's room, something shifted softly. The bed springs. A blanket dragged by a sleeping leg, then quiet again. The whole house felt built around that quiet now. Every sentence measured against whether it might travel down the hall and become the wrong sound in the night. Maya said, "If you do something tonight because you're angry, we don't get to undo it in the morning." Ethan leaned one hand against the counter and looked at her. "You think I'm still angry?" Her mouth tightened. "I think you're tired and humiliated and not thinking clearly." That almost made him laugh, but there was nothing in him loose enough for the sound. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in weeks." "Then don't," she stopped, changed course. At least sleep on it. I already did that, in the truck. Her face shifted just for a second. Not guilt, not only guilt. A flash of something else. Maybe the knowledge that the version of them where a line like that would have ended a conversation no longer existed. She said quieter now, I'm not asking you to protect him. Ethan looked at her for a long time. You're asking me to protect what's left, he said. Maya's throat worked. Yes. He waited. She didn't say what was left of what. The family. Noah's stability. Her own life. His job. The house. The mortgage. The shape of a future none of them had enough honesty left to name correctly. That omission answered more than any confession would have. Ethan took his phone out and set it on the counter between them. Maya stared at it as if the object itself might tell her what he had already decided. I'm sending it, he said. Her face lost color so quickly it looked almost like light changing across it. What did you write? Enough. To who? HR compliance, employee relations? Maya shut her eyes. It wasn't theatrical. Just the brief closing of someone who has walked into a wall they thought they still had a few more steps before reaching. When she opened them, they were wet but not yet spilling. Do you have any idea what happens after that? No, that's not a plan. It's more of a plan than pretending this fixes itself. She came around the counter then, not toward him exactly, more toward the phone. He moved it first. That stopped her cold. Please, she said, just listen for 1 minute. Ethan said nothing. Maya folded both arms across herself as if she were trying to hold in whatever was about to come out. I'm not defending him. You keep saying that. Because you keep looking at me like I am. He leaned back against the sink. Then don't sound like you're trying to save him. Something flared in her face. I'm trying to save you. He looked at her. For a second, the room held. Then he said, no, I think you're trying to save the part that still looks livable. That landed. Maya's eyes dropped, then lifted again. Maybe I don't know the difference right now. There it was, not full honesty, closer than she usually got to it. Ethan felt that admission hit him in a place anger hadn't been able to reach. Because if she didn't know the difference, then maybe every plea she'd made in the last few days had been split down the middle. Noah, yes, but also rent, routine, reputation, the sheer terror of becoming one more ruined suburban story told carefully among friends and school parents and people at church or nowhere at all. He looked down at the phone again. Maya said, if you do this, we don't control where it goes. We already don't. That's not the same thing. No, he said, it's worse. A floorboard creaked in the hallway behind them. Both of them turned. Noah stood at the mouth of the hall in his pajama pants and one sock, hair flattened on one side from sleep, blinking at them with the slow, startled confusion of a child, dragged halfway awake by the wrong tone in the air. Why are you up? Maya asked too brightly. Noah rubbed one eye. You were loud. Nobody answered that. He looked at Ethan. Are you leaving? No. Then why are your shoes on? Ethan looked down at his own feet, at the shoes he had forgotten he was still wearing, and felt something twist low and mean in him. Couldn't sleep, he said. Noah frowned. You were gone. I know. Noah looked from him to Maya and back again. The room was wrong. He could feel it. Ethan saw the calculation beginning. The inventory, the rising uncertainty, the search for something stable enough to grab hold of. Maya crouched. Come on, buddy, back to bed. Noah didn't move. Are you mad? Neither of them answered quickly enough. Noah's face changed a little. Not full distress yet. The smaller, more dangerous shift before it, when the child stopped asking and started absorbing. Ethan crossed the kitchen and crouched down in front of him. Not at you. Noah looked at him a second longer, then nodded in the solemn, unsatisfied way children nod, when they know the answer is shaped to fit them. Ethan put a hand on the back of his neck and walked him down the hall. Noah's skin was warm from bed. In the bedroom, the nightlight cast everything blue and unreal. The train sheets, the line of toy vehicles on the dresser, the weighted blanket bunched near the pillows. Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress, while Noah climbed back under the blanket without help. Are you here tomorrow? Noah asked. The question should have been simple. It wasn't. Ethan said, yeah. You promise? He looked at his son's face in the dim room, at the trust that still rose even now, battered but intact. Yeah, he said again. I promise. Noah seemed satisfied enough to let his eyes close. Ethan waited until his breathing lengthened before standing up. In the hallway, Maya was still there. She didn't speak until he passed her and went back into the kitchen. Then, very quietly, you can still not send it tonight. Ethan unlocked the phone. The email drafts stared back at him. Addresses already filled, body still mostly blank except for the few lines he'd typed standing outside the ballroom. He set the phone on the counter and started writing with both thumbs. Maya stayed where she was. He could feel her reading the shape of what his body had already decided. He didn't write everything. He didn't write the whole marriage. He didn't write every accusation that could be made and not all be wrong. He wrote what he could stand behind if he had to read it again in an office with fluorescent lights and an HR witness taking notes. He identified Grant by name and title. He stated there had been an undisclosed sexual relationship between Grant and his spouse, while Grant remained his direct superior. He stated that Grant had used unusual personal access to his home and family, and that, in a conversation after discovery, Grant had referenced Ethan's job and child's healthcare needs in a way Ethan experienced as coercive. He attached selected screenshots. Not all, enough to show pattern, enough to force the door open. When he got to the end, he stopped. The cursor blinked under the last line. Maya asked, "What exactly are you saying?" Without looking at her, Ethan said, "The truth I can prove. That's not the same as the whole truth." "No." He heard the scrape of her bare foot on the tile as she came a little closer. "Then you know how dangerous that is." He turned then. Maya stood 2 steps away, arms hanging loose now, too tired even for defensive posture. Her face looked older in the kitchen light than it had a month ago. He said, "You want the whole truth, Maya? The whole truth is you and he and I have all been using language to survive this. I'm done with the versions that sound better." Her eyes filled, not because he had found a perfect line, because he hadn't, because it was ugly enough to be true. She looked at the phone, then back at him. "If you send that, there's no more later." "No." "No more seeing what happens." "No." "No more waiting until Noah's in a better place." "No more if maybe No." Each answer came flatter than the last. Maya stared at him and understood finally that this was the point where delay stopped being an option either of them could hide behind. Her voice turned raw. "I don't know if I'm asking you to save yourself or save what's left of us or save him from fallout or save me from having to become the kind of woman people whisper about in parking lots. I don't know. She stopped and pressed her lips together hard. "I know once you send it, it becomes real in a different way." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and knew that was the closest she had come to saying what she was actually afraid of. Not just losing him, not just protecting Noah, exposure, collapse, the death of postponement. He nodded once, "Yeah." Then he hit send. For a second, nothing changed. The phone made no dramatic sound, no fanfare, just the soft, visual blink as the message left drafts and became outgoing. Maya made the smallest sound he had ever heard from another adult, something between breath and pain. Neither of them moved. Then the phone started vibrating. "Grant." Ethan looked at the screen, then at Maya, then back at the screen. He let it ring out. It started again, almost immediately. Then again, Maya whispered, "Don't answer." He looked at her. "Why?" She didn't answer. That was enough. On the 4th call, Ethan picked up. "Where are you?" Grant said. No greeting, no softening left now. Ethan leaned one hip against the counter. "Home." A pause, not of calm, of recalculation. "We need to talk in person." "No, you need to." Grant's voice dropped. "You sent something." Ethan said nothing. "I'm asking you not to make this uglier than it has to be." There was a different edge in him now. Not panic exactly. Something more insulting. Inconvenience sharpened by threat. Ethan said, "You've had a lot of practice deciding what counts as ugly." Another pause. Then Grant said, with effort visible even through the line, "Meet me tomorrow, before you make this into something you can't control." "It already is." "Ethan." He thought about hanging up. Instead, he said, "Where?" Grant named a conference room at the office complex. One not in the main trailer, one of the glass meeting spaces in the permanent building the company used for executive sessions and outside partners. 10, Grant said. Ethan ended the call. Maya was staring at him as if he had walked through a wall and kept going. The next morning, the meeting room smelled like polished wood and over-air-conditioned carpet. Too cold, too bright. Water glasses already set out at each chair as if civility could be staged in advance. Grant was there before him, jacket on this time, hands empty, expression drawn tighter than Ethan had ever seen it. Not uncomposed. Grant probably couldn't become fully uncomposed without a private act of violence, but tighter, as though he had been pulled inward overnight. At the far end of the room sat a woman from HR. Ethan knew only by name, Denise Keller, legal pad open, posture neutral, in the practiced way of people whose whole job involved sitting near disaster without appearing to choose sides. A man from compliance joined on speaker from another office, his voice tinny when he introduced himself, and then disappeared again behind silence. The fact of witnesses changed everything. It also clarified it. Grant nodded toward a chair. "Sit down." Ethan stayed standing for a second longer than politeness allowed, then sat. Denise said, "We're here to understand the concern that was raised last night and determine next steps." Her tone was careful, factual, almost bloodless. It helped, not because the system would save him, because neutral language in the room finally didn't belong only to Grant. Grant spoke first. Of course he did. He called it a personal matter that had crossed into professional space. He acknowledged poor judgment. He said he did not want Ethan penalized for something unrelated to work performance. He said he regretted that private boundaries had been mishandled. Boundaries. Mishandled. Ethan sat with both hands flat on the table and listened to a man reduce access to his home, his bed, his child, his salary, his whole humiliated gratitude into boundary language built for seminars. Denise turned to Ethan. Would you like to respond? For a second, the old instinct rose, the one that preferred endurance to speech, the one that thought if he stayed controlled enough, maybe dignity would come back on its own. Then he looked at Grant. Grant was watching him with the terrible patience of someone who still half-believed language could be bent back into service. Ethan said, yeah. His voice came out rougher than he wanted, but steady. He did not help me. No one moved. Ethan kept his eyes on Grant when he said the next part. He bought access to my home and called it generosity. The room changed. It wasn't loud. Denise didn't gasp. The compliance voice didn't cut in. But Grant's face finally lost its practiced arrangement for one naked second, and Ethan saw what he had come for. Not victory, exposure. Grant said, that is not a fair characterization. Ethan laughed once, softly. No, you're angry. Yes, that doesn't make your interpretation fact. Ethan leaned forward. You gave my kid gifts. You came into my house. You advanced me at work while texting my wife behind my back. Then you stood in my office and talked about my son's health care when I tried to leave. What exactly do you want me to call that? Grant's jaw tightened. I mentioned the practical impact on my son. Denise looked up from her notes then. Grant saw it, adjusted immediately. On the family situation. Ethan said, no, you don't get to clean it up now. It was the first time in the room. Grant had no quick, plausible synonym ready. Denise asked, still neutral. Mr. Holloway, did you reference healthcare coverage in your conversation with Mr. Carter after the disclosure? Grant hesitated. Tiny pause, fatal pause. I referenced the realities of employment transition, he said, which was as good as yes. Ethan felt something unclench. Not ease, not satisfaction, just the brutal relief of hearing the thing stay ugly in public after so many people had helped it sound respectable in private. Grant turned toward him fully then, composure cracking not in volume, but in contempt. You are going to burn your own life down trying to make this clean enough to hate. There it was, the first true thing he had said without wrapping it. Ethan looked at him and thought, maybe that was true. Maybe there was no way to drag this into the light without setting fire to things Noah would still need in the morning. But that wasn't the same as letting Grant keep authorship. He said, you don't get to tell me what my life costs. No one spoke after that, not for several seconds. Then Denise cleared her throat softly and moved them into process. Next steps, administrative leave, internal review, confidentiality language no one in the room really believed in. Ethan heard most of it, not all. Enough to know the job might still be there by policy and gone by reality. Enough to know consequences had started moving already, whether or not they ever arrived with names. When the meeting ended, Grant stood too fast. For 1 second, it looked like he might say something off script, something unforgivable, in the smaller, pettier human way. Instead, he gathered himself back into shape. That, more than anger, made Ethan understand the break was final. Not because Grant was ashamed, because even now he was still trying to remain legible as the better man in the room. Ethan walked out before anyone offered him a hand or a packet or a sympathetic sentence. The hallway outside the conference room was lined with framed aerial photos of bridges and interchange work. The carpet muted his steps. Somewhere down the corridor, someone laughed at something said in an entirely different meeting in an entirely different life. When he stepped outside the building, the heat hit him full in the face. He stopped on the front walk and stood there for a moment in the white Arizona morning. Not sure if he still had a job, not sure what Maya was doing in the house he had left, not sure what version of his name would be in circulation by lunch. But his shoulders were no longer rounded in on themselves. He noticed that only because they had been for so long. The house after truth. The house was quieter now. Not peaceful, not settled, just quieter, the way a room went quiet after something heavy had been dragged across the floor and set down in a place no one had planned for it to live. A week had passed since the meeting. Maybe 8 days. Ethan had stopped counting cleanly after the third morning of waking before the alarm and lying still beside the sound of the air vent, waiting to hear whether Noah would get up easy or not. Time hadn't exactly blurred. It had thinned. Everything that used to divide the day into neat pieces, work, commute, dinner, bedtime, had been replaced by other markers. The email from HR that said the matter was under review, the follow-up from compliance that asked for any additional documentation. The brief call from operations informing Ethan his field duties were being temporarily reassigned pending internal findings. No conclusion, no apology, no moral clarity handed down from above. Just process. American process. Neutral fonts. Careful verbs. Under review. Temporary adjustment. No presumption of outcome. That morning, Ethan stood at the kitchen counter with Noah's therapy binder open and the snack pouch box at his elbow. Applesauce, not yogurt. Noah had rejected yogurt twice that week, and Ethan had learned not to test patterns on therapy mornings. Noise-canceling headphones in the front pocket. Chewy tube clipped to the inside ring. Change of shirt folded flat because if speech ran long and OT followed and one wrong sensory moment tipped the day, having dry clothes could matter more than any adult believed it should. Behind him, the coffee maker clicked to a stop. Maya poured herself a cup and did not ask if he wanted one. That had become one of the new silences. Not hostile, not courteous either, just the absence of old reflex. The light in the kitchen was still gray-blue with early morning. Outside, the Arizona sky was just beginning to bleach at the edges. That colorless bright that always came before heat announced itself properly. The neighborhood was waking in distant pieces. A garage door somewhere, a dog barking once, a truck starting up 2 houses down. Ethan checked the binder again. Insurance card, appointment sheet. Noah's weighted lap pad folded on top because the waiting room at the therapy center sometimes ran too loud and too bright, and Noah did better with something heavy across his knees. Maya stood across the kitchen island with her phone in one hand and a notepad in the other. She had been doing that a lot lately, writing things down, making lists, calling people back. Not dramatic reinvention, not some miraculous arc of redemption, just practical movement. 2 days earlier, Ethan had overheard her on the phone in the laundry room, speaking to someone from her old office job in the careful, non-confessional voice people used when they needed work and didn't have the luxury of explaining the whole landscape of why. Yesterday, she had asked whether he wanted her to take Fridays if she could pick up remote bookkeeping hours from a friend of a friend. She had stopped saying, "I did it for us." That was the change. Not apology, not absolution, the end of that language. Noah came into the kitchen in socks and his navy sweatpants, rubbing one eye with the heel of his palm. His hair was flattened on one side and standing straight up on the other. He stopped by the table and looked at the binder. "Today therapy?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Speech or OT first?" "Speech." Noah frowned and looked at the printed schedule card Ethan had set out beside the bowl. "Then snack? Then OT." Noah considered the sequence, accepted it, sat down. Maya put his bowl in front of him. "Dry cereal first." Milk poured only after he nodded. Another one of the house's 1,000 learned accommodations. He ate in silence for a minute, not unhappy, not cheerful either, just focused. Ethan watched the concentration in his son's face and felt again the now familiar split inside himself, the grim steadiness that had carried him through the last week, and the softer, more dangerous knowledge that none of it had made life easier for the child at the table. Noah looked up suddenly. "Dad, are you driving?" "Yeah." "Mom too?" The room shifted half an inch. Maya answered first. "Dad's taking you." Noah looked at Ethan, waiting. "Just me," Ethan said. Noah nodded, but only after a beat. Maya turned away and rinsed her mug at the sink, though she hadn't finished it. The sound of water ran too long before she shut it off. Ethan packed the applesauce, the crackers, the little container of blueberries. Noah hated when fruit touched anything dry. He zipped the binder, checked for the headphones again, even though he already knew they were there. Across from him, Maya tore a paper towel into smaller squares and lined them beside Noah's bowl. No one had asked her to. Sometimes she still moved like there were tiny damages she could prevent if she stayed ahead of them. The company email had come late the night before. "Mr. Carter, we are continuing our internal review. In the meantime, your benefits remain active. We appreciate your patience." Benefits remain active. That line had done more to steady his breathing than any expression of concern could have, which in itself felt like another education in adulthood Ethan had not wanted. Noah slid off his chair. "Blue shoes." "Okay." He went to the living room to find them. Maya stayed at the sink, both hands braced on the edge, not looking at Ethan, not speaking. He kept packing. After a minute, she said, "They emailed?" He knew which email she meant. "Yeah." "And?" "Nothing final." She nodded once. No visible relief, not disappointment either, just the acceptance of one more day in the middle. Ethan picked up the binder. "Benefits stay on for now." That did change her face, just slightly. A loosening around the mouth, a breath let go too fast. She hated that he saw it. He hated that he did too. Neither of them said anything about it. Noah came back carrying one sneaker and dragging the other by the lace. Ethan took both and knelt to tie them. The routine of it had become more deliberate lately, maybe because Noah had started checking, looking longer, testing whether the same people were still reachable inside the same motions. "Too tight," Noah said as soon as Ethan finished the first shoe. Ethan loosened it. "Like this?" Noah flexed his foot, and okay. When both shoes were tied, Noah stood and leaned against Ethan's shoulder for a second, absent-mindedly, already focused on the next step in the sequence. Ethan stayed crouched a moment longer than necessary. Maya was watching from across the kitchen, not with yearning, not even exactly with grief, more like someone looking at a language she used to speak fluently and no longer trusted herself to enter without damage. Ethan stood. He slung the therapy binder over one shoulder, picked up the snack bag, and reached for the car keys on the counter. Maya asked very quietly, "Do you want me to come?" The question hung there. Noah was at the door now, pressing his fingers against the glass, humming under his breath in the soft, repetitive way he did when mornings were still holding together. Ethan looked at Maya. She had not dressed to leave, no shoes on, hair still clipped up with the cheap claw clip she wore around the house. This wasn't a performance of motherhood or devotion. It was a real question asked from inside a new reality neither of them had finished mapping. "Do you want me to come?" As his wife, as Noah's mother, as the person who still had a right to stand beside them in fluorescent waiting rooms, as the person who maybe didn't know anymore which of those roles still applied. Ethan stopped with the keys in his hand. He could have said no quickly and made it clean. He could have said yes and postponed something again. Instead, he stood there long enough for the silence to become part of the answer. Then he said, "Be ready when we get back." Maya didn't move. Ethan went on, and the words came out flatter than he had intended, but truer for it. "We need to talk about what this house is now." Noah turned from the door. "Can we go?" "Yeah," Ethan said. He crossed the room, opened the door, and held it while Noah walked out ahead of him into the early brightness. Then Ethan bent, took the binder and snack bag in one hand, and lifted Noah into his other arm, not because Noah couldn't walk, but because 6-year-olds still sometimes allowed themselves to be carried in moments adults did not fully understand until later. Noah leaned against him, warm and solid, already looking toward the truck. Ethan stepped onto the driveway. Behind him, he heard nothing from Maya at first. No plea, no apology, no last attempt to rename what had happened. By the time he reached the truck and set Noah down by the passenger side, he looked back. She was standing in the doorway with one hand lightly around the frame, not framed like a wife in an old life, not waiting to be reassured, just standing there as the person who still lived in that house and still loved the same child and no longer had the shelter of old words. Ethan opened the passenger door and helped Noah climb in, buckled him, set the binder by his feet, put the headphones in Noah's lap. Not on his ears yet. Noah asked, "Mom not coming?" "Not today." Noah accepted that, though not happily. He pressed his fingers to the window instead. Ethan shut the door and walked around to the driver's side. The gravel at the edge of the driveway crunched under his shoes. Morning light had reached full strength now, flat on the hood, white on the sidewalk, merciless in the way only desert light could be. When he got in, Noah was already arranging the headphone cord into a straight line. Ethan put the key in the ignition but didn't turn it yet. Through the windshield, he could see Maya still standing there. Not crying, not waving, just there. The house behind her looked the same as it always had. Beige stucco, narrow front window. The little planter cracked at the side. A rental, or maybe a starter home depending on who was telling the story. From the street, nothing about it said anything had ended inside it. Ethan started the engine. The truck shuddered once and settled. Noah put one headphone cup on, then stopped halfway through the second and said, "Dad." "Yeah." "When we come back, is Mom here?" Ethan kept his eyes on the driveway for a second before answering. "Yeah," he said. That, at least, was still true. He eased the truck into reverse. Maya stepped back once, giving the vehicle space. Her hand slipped from the door frame and then returned to it, light but definite, as if she needed one point of contact with the structure behind her to stay upright in the version of morning they had reached. Ethan backed into the street, shifted into drive, and pulled away. In the side mirror, he saw her getting smaller in the doorway, still not moving. The house fixed behind her like scenery after the actors had changed roles and no one had bothered to rebuild the set. Noah hummed softly beside him, one headphone half on, the therapy binder at his feet. Ethan kept driving. There were victories, he was learning, that did not return a single thing to the shape it had before. They didn't save love. They didn't restore innocence. They didn't even guarantee safety. They only kept one thing from being taken last: By the time the truck turned onto the main road, the house was gone from view.